Hello everyone, you're listening to the Mystai Podcast. I'm Chris, and today I'm joined again by another returning guest, which is Chris Warnock, the founder of Renaissance Astrology. Me and Chris have been talking for quite a while. I am a current student in his astrological magic program, and he is an outstanding traditional astrologer. And in this episode, we talk quite extensively about remedial astrology, Iatromathematica, hermetic astrology and the deacons, and also just the general worldview of astrology as we reconvene after a couple of years. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy.
Discussion topics. One of the things that's been coming up quite recently as kind of a popular topic of discussion in my forums and my stuff that I've been working on is like the Iatromathematica and like remedial astrology, like using astrological magic.
Yeah. I know it's just ridiculously popular.
It's a thing right now. It really is. And there's uptake about hermetic astrology and stuff as well, like the Liber Hermetis.
It's just Liber Hermetis. I mean, here's what I would say about it is that, when I'm increasingly there's this sort of skeptic criticism of astrology, right? Right. And if you go to because a lot of people, they're just ignore it, or like they think it's fun, right?
Sure.
Which is a little frustrating for the quote scientists.
Right.
But for you look at a skeptic and they're going to say, look, this is just astrology is just a way of psychological. It's like like a pacifier for people.
Right. It's psychologizer.
It's an anesthetic. And so, and that's actually true. And this is what's sort of sad is that, and again, it's extremely difficult for people to face this, because basically what I'm saying, it sounds like I'm saying you're bad and I'm not bad. So therefore this can't, you know what I mean? Anything negative the self is going to immediately say that doesn't apply to me.
Right. And anything that kind of like attacks or what people perceive of as attacking the worldview, it's automatic.
Or just themselves. I mean, I do this and you're saying that's bad. So I'm not doing that. Either you're wrong or I'm not doing it. So from my perspective, and this is, I do lots of readings. I do talismans and everything like that. I mean, it seems like a tremendous number of people, there's two sort of purposes that they're using astrology for. One is for reassurance and the other is for a false sense of control. Right. And so, for example, people come to me and they want to ask a horary question. They say, when am I going to get a job?
Right.
And of course, I'm going to get a job. And your job is to tell me when I'm going to get a job, because I'm freaking out because I haven't had a job. Is it going to be in 2 weeks or is it going to be 3 weeks?
Right. There's already an inherent assumption in the worry.
Exactly. And I'm like, is it going to help you if I say you're not going to get a job? And that freaks people out. Because people are like, basically, I'm not doing my job. The job of the astrologer. See, I tell them what they want to hear, and then they don't tell me I'm wrong if I turn out to be wrong.
Right.
This is the tacit conspiracy. The false sense of control comes into play when people are actually doing it, not so much as the client, but a certain amount. What you do, and again, I had this dear friend of mine, and he was having all these troubles recently, and he's pretty serious astrologer, but he's like, I looked at the ephemeris and I could see it was, moons, whatever, some transit. And I said, except you didn't predict that in advance. I said, you can always look and see something. Like I said, it's like looking at Hitler's chart, right? Oh, look, we can see what happened in Normandy. Look, it's there in the chart. And that's what most people are doing when they consider astrology, is they already know the outcome. And they're finding a factor to link up with that outcome.
Right.
So go ahead.
Do you think that sort of presumption of that kind of attitude of assumption actually can influence an horary reading, or like just their perception of it?
Well, horary is pretty much free of that.
Okay.
And this is why quote, traditional astrology has such high prestige, right? Is because you've got these people that are in the QHP and Olivia Barclay's lineage, people like Lee Lehman or John Frawley or Deb Holding or Sue Ward and all their students and all the people working in there that use this great methodology from Lilly, right? And they're constantly getting unknown questions that they don't know the answer to, and they're making a specific prediction, and then they often will get feedback, right? And that has allowed the horary to be, it's an excellent technique. And yet it's practiced continually. And you can't fool yourself with horary as easily.
Right.
Because typically it's unknown, right?
Right. Well, this was one of my questions with Ori, actually. You might be able to clarify this for me. Like, as I understand Ori, a large part of it is, you cast the chart for a question or the election, whatever it is, at the time when you receive the question and understand the question.
Right.
So then, theoretically, like, if a client was familiar with astrology and knew, target astrology and electoral astrology, couldn't they just wait to ask the question until they looked at a sign or looked at an election, knew it was going to be positive over the next week, and then deliberately asked the question?
Yes, you can definitely. It's like going through the tarot deck and pulling out all the negative cards.
Right. So okay, yeah.
You can force a yes answer, but it won't be accurate.
It won't be accurate. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, do you want it accurate? I mean, people do that all the time. Because see, the whole point is I want a yes, and your job is to give me a yes. I mean, I had people complaining about my horary casebook. They said, there's too many negative answers in there. And that's your fault. What kind of a freaking astrology are you giving negative answers? You're not doing your job properly. Your job is to make it come out right, to give us what we want.
They associate the yes or the positive aspects with rightness, right? And I think it's kind of a theme I've noticed with, I guess like a major difference between traditional and modern astrology. The modern astrology really kind of desensitizes a little of the harsher aspect in traditional.
Desensitized, there isn't anything negative in it, except for a few things. Right. So they've imported void of course moon, Mercury retrograde, right? Those are the big ones. And because everything else is positive, those factors have to carry the weight of negativity. So they're apocalyptically disastrous.
Right. So everyone's world ends with the Mercury retrograde.
Exactly. Yeah. And does it? No. I mean, Mercury retrograde is a perfect example. Again, false sense of control. So it's like, I don't know what's going to happen with Mercury retrograde, but something bad's going to happen or not. And then if something happens during Mercury retrograde, it's Mercury retrograde, but I didn't know, could never have predicted that in advance. And bad stuff happens when it's not Mercury retrograde, and people have a perfectly wonderful time when it is Mercury retrograde.
Right. Or like people will, one of the things that I love kind of picking people up on, that's always really fun for me, is like when people will try and attribute all their problems to Mercury retrograde, and then it just so happens that at the time they're doing it, Mercury's combust at the same time.
So, that doesn't matter.
Doesn't?
I mean, Mercury, what you're getting now is malefic creep.
Right.
And so as the knowledge of medieval Renaissance astrology starts to percolate, then there's more negative stuff. Well, that's also part of that, like I said, false sense of control, right? Because there's a lot of bad stuff out there, and you got to watch out for it, and really bad shit's going to happen, right? And if I just avoid these bad things, right, then I'm okay. Or if, like I said, again, it's, and the modern style is make it up as you go along.
Right.
Just, there's maybe 50 things you could do, and they just pop out at you. Like when you do an election, you just start looking at charts and look at that. And it's not like you have set factors, right?
Right. There's always going to be some kind of trade-off, because it's almost never.
Well, and this is one of those problems too, is that, again, it's really apocalyptic. So like I said, we're basically slopping around in this, but the underlying thing is that people are not really interested in prediction. They are as a concept, because it makes the reassuring stuff more reassuring, and the false sense of control more of a sense of control. So you don't want to recognize that you're not predicting, but you don't really want a prediction.
Right.
And again, the modern is not capable of prediction.
As in the modern worldview?
No, modern astrology.
Modern, okay, yeah, like a modern, right.
You can't really predict for it. And now what you can do with it is, if you're intuitive, you can do like a tarot reading with it, or a crystal ball reading, or whatever, right? With tarot, there's very little support there. You just got the cards, right?
Right.
I guess people can be very accurate with it, but what it's happening is that their intuition is heavily being. Now, intuition is a very important part of medieval Renaissance astrology too, but it's intuition within the confines of the chart, right? And it depends. But like I said, I don't want to. The other flip side of that is that the idea that it works, it's algorithmic, and it does it itself.
Right.
The techniques work by themselves.
Yeah,
without the astrology.
Fully predicts how a talisman is going to manifest, or only its general sphere influence.
No, I mean, you can get very accurate predictions, but it's going to require like Horary, really good technique, plus a very experienced and intuitive astrologer on the top of their game. And then you can predict really specific stuff, you know? So, I mean, Horary is crazy that way. You can get some amazingly precise predictions out of it. You know,
Right.
not always.
Yeah. I guess that's what also kept it popular for so long as well, like the fact that it was so accurate.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. But what keeps it accurate though is the fact that you've got the set of techniques that's pretty common. I mean, if you look at John Frowley or Lee Lehman or me, or, they're pretty much 80-90% of the technique is similar, right? It's coming out of Lily's Christian Astrology, right? Who was a genius. And then you're testing it because you're making a prediction based on an unknown outcome, and then you're getting the results. And I do all mine in writing. I have done over 5,000 readings for clients. I have every single reading in writing that I've ever done. And then if I get feedback, I save, and I probably have, 300, 400, 500 of those.
Yeah.
That I've got I should publish that before I'm not going to be.
I would love to read it. I was going to say.
Well, I don't know, because nobody reads my Horary casebook, or people bitch about it. I mean, it's the comments on that were like, this doesn't tell you how to do Horary all in one book, and there's too many negative things in it, and it's easy. I tried these and I knew every single one. And that was just like, that was just kind of funny in terms of it. But I thought the casebook was really useful because what I have my students do is I say, look at the question, right? And then the chart, and then do your own prediction, and then look at the outcome. And it's real, That's a good way of practice. What's not a good way of practicing is, oh, look at Hitler's chart and look what happened. I mean, the outcome then. I mean, or celebrity charts, or all that sort, or your own chart, natal chart. I mean, all that stuff. Just like, it's all fake, right? And nobody wants to hear that because, again, I mean, basically not everyone, but a lot of people seem to think they're like Abu Mashar or Ptolemy. I mean, they're inventing shit on the spot, and then they're like thinking this is some genius, astrology thing.
I think that's probably true for a lot of different magical fields, not just astrology. It's a common theme, but it's happening in astrology as well, I think.
I mean, I see it because that's what I'm doing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I think the modern thing is I'm a genius. And what's funny is that everybody's unique stuff looks like everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. So
we're kind of just combining shit for the sake of artistry.
But the remediation is a good example. So again,
let's go on to
go back to that. So here's the basic view is that it's extremely easy to see what's going on in your life.
Sure.
By looking at the natal chart, right? And that instantly reveals the root of all problems. And the root of all problems is the planets are messing you up. So right. Saturn is in the 7th house, and he's beaming shit at you somehow, right? And he's fucking you up. And so if you could shield yourself or deal with Saturn, then your life would be wonderful. You'd be a billionaire and you'd have everything you want.
Sure.
And so all we have to do is, so like I said, the causality is directly from the planets or the things there, and it's beams, it's energy, it's some kind of, electromagnetic kind of something or other. And then you can see it really easily, and you can solve it really easily too. And then the other person, I was talking to someone recently, like, oh, they're doing remediation badly, it's giving people cancer. I'm like, that's the flip side of it, is the irrational positivity of modern is also, there's a dark side of that, which is irrational negativity too. People get so frightened. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of fear involved, and it's just not that powerful. I mean, I said to this person, I said, you're not going to be curing cancer with talismans, and you're not giving cancer to people with talismans. It's not that powerful, And this is magic isn't magic. I mean, real magic, really actual practical application of spiritual principles, right? Which is what magic and astrology are. It operates in the real world, so it can't be all powerful. You can't just, Bewitched. I don't know if you had that. It was an American TV series, and they'd wiggle their nose, and then just stuff would pop in and out of existence. You know what I mean? It's like, this is not, 3 wishes from the genie kind of thing. It's like, it just doesn't work that way.
Right.
It couldn't.
Yeah.
How could it?
But yeah, I mean, we're still operating, I guess, in if it's let's take the example of sublunary, right? We're still, even if we're operating on manifesting things from certain planets or creating results for certain talismans, like that still has to be done in sublunary nature, which is subject to generation, right? So there's still constraints on that.
Well, it'd be even harder in the heavens. I mean, it's
Right.
you're not going to make it any easier up there. I mean, like I said, you're talking about, if you're talking about, the change, you don't get a change except through applying a certain amount of energy or force or whatever, right? And so, on the other hand, the thing about it is that, in my view, there is no matter and there is no objective reality.
That's interesting. What do you
a consciousness only view of things.
Right?
So to change consciousness is to change reality. That's not that easy to do, though. I mean, the flow of karma, the flow of ideas is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And so that's not the easiest thing to do, but nevertheless. But see, that's getting a little kind of esoteric for people. It's a Buddhist. I mean, that's to say.
It sounds very kind of Hermetic and Buddhist.
It is. But see, people brandish Hermetic stuff as a label, right? And in fact, they're just some tired old 19th century, new age, new science, kind of,
Right. So, I mean,
that's all we're dealing with it's like Scientology and Christian Science, just putting this sort of like, new age veneer over basically this sort of modern atheistic materialistic view of things, that, and so, like I said, the overwhelming view of people, I mean, I have people that actually think astrology works through magnetism.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that they can't understand why the scientists don't, because obviously it's scientifically provable, which it's not. And, there's no scientific, energetic or mechanical explanation for astrology and magic.
Yeah.
It isn't. And so the substitute for that is, it's scientific energy. So it's just like energy, it's not detectable. So it's beams and waves and all this sort of stuff. And this is how everybody operates. And so when you start from that causality, then that influences how everything else you think about it. And then also it's about me.
Right.
How do I get what I want?
And everything revolves around you. And it's directly.
Exactly. I mean, even like the Crowley is like, what is that? Magic is, will. What was that about his, will and conformity with whatever?
Yeah, and the whole thing of saying like go and experience it in your brain and that kind of thing.
No, the chaos magic, all that stuff. And as I said, is like, it's psychologizing everything. I mean, it's, as I said, because you can't. That's your problem. And then you've got this sort of like, again, not that I would ever want to have astrology like certified and, all that professional garbage. But the problem is everybody seems to think that they can pick it up in 5 minutes.
Right.
And I have lots of people emailing me and telling me things, teaching me. They know things and they're teaching me these things, which is kind of funny.
Like, is any of them actually stuff you don't know, or is it just like random people?
No, it's the same old modern. I mean, like I said, just the same old foolishness that everybody does. But they're going to explain it to me.
Right.
And or people, like I said, with the talisman stuff. I mean, that people will tell me their whole. They have made up some theory about what's a good talisman for them, and my job is to tell them that they're right.
Right. So their
job is to sign off on it. And so what I have to do is I say, well, like I just did a video, it's going to go premiere tomorrow. And I said, as far as choosing talismans, I said, look, this is how I do it. And I said, I started from this one passage in Picatrix that says, if you're doing an invocation of a planet and that planet happens to be strong in your natal chart, then the invocation will be strong as well. It'll be more secure. It'll be more certain. So that's the kind of logic, because see, when you're choosing talismans from the natal chart, everyone's like, of course you have to do that, because of course the natal chart is everything. Everything is the natal chart, which makes sense because the whole world revolves around you.
Sure.
I mean, and things like, for example, if Saturn is in the 7th house, my 7th house in my natal chart, that's a love talisman for me. Because it's in my 7th house. So it must be a love talisman for me. Everything transforms based on my perspective. So that's like a lot of that stuff is perfectly natural. For me, the natal chart is like, I'm like, it makes sense, except that I look at that as more, I look at the essential dignity, and that gives me a kind of an idea of the pre-existing relationship, sort of, except that there's plenty of people like for example, so I'm not looking at house placement, I'm not looking at aspects, I'm not looking at anything except essential dignity and then retrogradation and combustion. And so, but I had this classic example. I have this guy who bought a Jupiter talisman. He calls me up and says, "It's so great. It's been such a great talisman for me." And I said, "Let's look at your chart." He had Jupiter and Capricorn in fall. It was great for him. And so what I do is to say it's a question mark. If it's afflicted, then you get a question mark. Then you need to do some divination, because that particular talisman might be a good fit for you. It might well work. But see, the way most people take it is like screaming, horrific, run for the hills,
Right. They assume
horrible,
that's a very intense
disastrous thing. They're frightened. And the slightest thing that comes up, they're running, screaming. And it's like, no. So that's what I'm saying. But I'm also saying my method, I don't know. I mean, this is what I do, but I certainly wouldn't say it's the only way to do it.
Sure.
And so when people email me, they have their own method. I'm like, use your method. I mean, it's what I like to people to do is to look at my talismans as just kind of like, you can apply them any way you want. You know what I mean? There's not like, I mean, I made them according to my kind of interpretation of how the traditional sources work. That interpretation is basically used by everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, the framework that I set up is what everybody's working from, unless they're just making it up modern style.
Sure. Well, yeah, the majority of the traditional sources are mostly coming out of your translations.
But more than that, how do you work with those sources? That was one of my primary gifts to the astrological magic community, was to say, okay, here's these sources. So how can we stay within the essence of that practice and not turn it into just strip off the surface of it?
Sure.
It's like if I go and get a can of Chef Boyardee, which is a commercial brand spaghetti, and I open up the can and pour it out, I'm not an Italian chef.
Right. You still need to learn.
And so I'm saying I actually want to be, as far as the astrological magic, I want to be an Italian chef. I don't just want to take bits and pieces of it and make and pretend. And so taking those essential, I set up a sort of a framework I said, okay, these are the factors I'm going to say you have to have. These are the factors you can't have. And then everything else I'm going to say it's either a bonus or it's not negative enough for me to worry about. For example, void of course moon. A horrific, horrible disaster in modern astrology. But I'm like, it's just in traditional, it's not that bad. And just like you said, you have to make some trade-offs.
Yeah.
And so I don't worry about void of course moon in in my thing. Oh, I saw somebody saying that there are these websites and they don't follow the rule of void of course moon. And of course that's convincing to people because they've heard of it.
Right.
And so that's like, oh, well, there you go. Because there's about 10 things that everybody knows.
Yeah.
Right? And then that is just, it's dogma. And they don't question where it came from, and they don't question because everybody knows it. So we just follow it blindly, or stuff like the whole sidereal zodiac sort of thing. And again, why is that so popular with people? Because they're atheistic materialists.
Yeah,
and they don't want to delve into. Because I had occasionally have people say that to me. I recently had a comment on a YouTube video saying, I couldn't believe it. It's like, you're the one. I said, due to you, I realized I was an atheistic materialist, because everybody else is like, well, that sounds bad, so I'm not an atheistic materialist.
Right.
Even though I do think that, everything's it's energetic causality.
Right. Well, I think it's also unconscious sometimes for people, like worldviews.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, what I would say about it is a lot of the stuff that I'm asking people to do is to face themselves and face their shadow stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not easy for me to do.
Sure.
And I don't do it entirely, but that's a lot to ask of people. So
yeah,
like I said, it's just one of those things of like, so why don't you ask a question, and then because you can see as usual, I'm just wandering.
No, I'm loving it. It's great. Yeah, this is great. It's good to unpack.
But remediation. So that's what I say about it. Back to remediation. So basically, you've got this idea that it's easy to fix. It's easy to see what the problems are and easy to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the remediation of the chart is like someone's delivering a telegram, and you lock your door so they can't bring the telegram. See, I solved the problem.
Yeah. So
you don't have to worry about it because, or I shot killed the messenger, right?
Right.
The planets in your chart are messengers. They're not the direct causal link as far as I'm concerned, right?
Okay.
And because look at horary, how could there be a direct energetic causal? I mean, you could see it with a natal chart. There's energy beaming at a certain angle from Jupiter at your birth, and it imprinted on your physical body, and it caused certain things, right?
Mm.
Maybe. But horary, how would that work? the time that the astrologer receives and understands the question gives it the answer. How's the energy? How could that be energetic causality?
Right, because it's all down to interpretation, or like the influence or whatever going into the dude's intuition or whatever, or like the dude's personal intuition still working on it. So you can't really attribute that to anything
It
material.
has to be that the cosmos is completely patterned. That there's incredible underlying patterning, right?
Yeah.
And therefore that's what the astrologer is reading. You're looking at the chart, and the combination of your technique, your experience, and your intuition and the chart gives you the answer, allows you to read the underlying state of the cosmos. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the answer. It can't be beams.
Because
it just wouldn't.
Do you think there's like, do you think that sometimes there's like this whole sort of obsession with beams is also like a misinterpretation of Kindi, like his little stellar rays thing?
Yes, because the beams that he's talking about are not electromagnetic.
Right. And not like
what he's working from is the sun.
And
I have a thing about this. All your pre-modern, I mean, the whole word energy as a scientific term is 19th century. And so the beams we're talking about are sunlight, right?
Right.
And there's this quality of life, of warmth, and of consciousness that goes along with those views, right? And so that's not the same thing as photons.
Right.
The word is the same, right? But so we're able to slide into, it's the whole thing of the, Giordano Bruno is a scientist, you know what I mean? That kind of
right.
Stuff,
kind of a mark of science against the Christian. Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth I was a feminist or something like that. You know what I mean? Totally anachronistic. That doesn't. You basically go back and everybody you hijack as a scientist, right? And you forget about like Sir Isaac Newton, right? I mean, obviously brilliant in terms of, but he was totally into alchemy and theology.
Well, yeah, and
I just forget about that.
Like I think I can't remember the exact number, but like they say he wrote like 4 or 5 books on physics, and he wrote like 40.
He spent more time on theology and alchemy than he did on quote science. But see, that doesn't fit the image of the great scientist, so we'll just edit that out. It doesn't exist anymore. So that's what I'm saying. A lot of this is psychology. That's the more, as I get into this, it's funny because I spent a lot. I mean, I'll give you an example. This is a kind of weird example, but I'm dealing with a situation with this friend of mine, and they're like, one of their parents is, suffering from dementia, right? So they're trying to figure out what to do as far as like, taking care of the person, everything. And they're trying to take care of. Now, one of the things you can do is they can the person can designate someone to make healthcare decisions for them if they're incapacitated.
Yeah.
Right. So that person hasn't done that. You have to fill out a form for it. They haven't done it. So we're trying to figure out in my state who makes the decision. And so looking online, and it says, oh, by law, it's the family, and it lists these family, like you first have your like spouse, and then
next of kin or whatever.
Yeah. So, but they don't say what now I'm a lawyer, right? So I'm like, well, what's the statute? Right. So I look and I look and there isn't a stat. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? So what it turns out is that they did have a state statute, in 2005, they passed the statute that said they have the state board, and the state board could act as the decision maker, right? If they didn't have anybody else. But then a couple years later, they defunded it. And I'm like, I know what happened because it got into that whole euthanasia thing.
Right. So
they started saying a government board is going to kill your grandmother.
Yeah.
So and then what they did was, so there's no law on it. And so the hospitals just kind of, what they did was look at, if you die without a will, there's a certain order in which the money goes to people, right? They took that list and adapted it for this medical decision making, right? And so that's kind of what they do. But see, basically, you can see it's all psychological, like, because they can't deal with it. They can't face this whole issue squarely. People start freaking out about death too much to actually think about how are we going to have a statute, or like I said, the death panels or whatever, that freaked everybody out. Yeah. So everyone thinks it's all being done rationally. I'm rational. The system's rational. Everything's going on. When you examine it, there's all this shadow psychological stuff and hidden thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that applies to astrology as much, because like I said, the main function of astrology for most people is to reassure them or to give them a false sense of control.
Right. There's like confirmation stuff.
It's not about prediction, you know. It's not about, I mean, and the talisman stuff, when I say to people is I'm like, because I have 85 pages of testimonials.
Sure.
I don't think anybody has as many testimonials as I do as far as the talismans. And, and it runs, 10 to 1 positive. I don't get very many people, complaining or anything like that. But what I say to people is I said, look, they say, what's going to happen? I said, I don't know. I mean, this is the reality of it, is that we don't know what the effects, and they're going to vary for each person, and you might not even get any effects. But generally, because it's angelic, you're not going to get bad effects. I mean, the worst people typically see is nothing, but that's certainly possible. You just kind of have to see what's going to happen. And that's helpful because when people come from that perspective, they open themselves up, right? But I said to people, I said, if I could guarantee $1 million, I'd sell it for $999,000.
Right. Yeah.
I had somebody say to me not too long ago, they said, oh, in Indonesia, these guys, and they're really great, and it really works. I said, yeah, but it can't be all powerful. Like, oh no, you can do all this stuff. I said, if it was, those guys would be running the world. How come Indonesian folk aren't the
old magic problem. Like, if you can just manifest money, then why aren't you a millionaire?
Exactly. But see, think of that with the financial astrology. I mean, there's a zillion people, and hope springs eternal. But that's what I always say. I'm like, if they could really reliably work right on crypto or whatever the flavor of the month is now, you would not need to sell it. Why would you be selling it? But see, people want to believe in it.
Right.
The desire to believe, wipes out the stuff. So that's what I would say about the astrological stuff. Is it's like you basically it requires you to really face yourself.
Right.
It requires you to look at your motivation. Now, for example, I'm not free of reassurance. It's not like I'm coming and saying, oh, I'm so superior to all you people. It's like, I mean, I do reassurance readings, but what I do is I recognize it. So I do like an I Ching. I have a computer site that does I Ching, right? And so it has a random I Ching generator that's based on it's going to be based on the time you put it in there, right? So that aligns to the moment, right? Even though it's through a computer. And I usually ask, what's my current situation? Like, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
Give me the patterning of the current time, today, basically. And so, I mean, I'd like to get a good one. I definitely would like to get a good one.
I think everyone would, yeah.
But I get bad ones sometimes. But what I do is I accept it. I'm like, okay. And I don't ask again. And I don't try to ask different questions to get a different answer. I don't get upset. I respect it too. I don't try to overthrow it. Like if the I Ching says don't do anything today, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do anything drastic today. You know what I mean? I won't try to. A lot of times I'm like, I feel like, oh man, what's going on? It says, yeah, you're kind of, it's kind of low energy period. And I'm like, okay. But that's the thing. Respect the oracle, and if you don't like the answer, that's okay. But you can't force yourself to like it. But at the same time, don't try to just like I said, if you do it until you get a yes answer, or if you ask, like you're saying, if you ask a horary at a time when the things are good, you're not going to get an accurate answer.
Yeah, you're cheating yourself.
Yeah. But you're not really cheating yourself because you're trying to get reassurance, and that's the whole point anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So it depends on what you're like, how aware you are of what you're doing. And so that's what I would say about it. But, the people that the clients that come back to me with horary, they like the fact that you're giving them an accurate answer. It's useful. Someone's, I have somebody who has always asking about business stuff, and that's great. I like business ones. And they're like, should I sell this house? And I'm like, well, it looks like a pretty good house. It's got probably has these particular problems with it. The price is probably too high, things like that. You know what I mean? It's really useful information. And the relationship ones are fun. I mean, I do probably them more than anything else. They're probably the most accurate because people care. I mean, that's something that's really visceral. So we get a really good question from the timing of it. Is the emotion gives you the timing. When you really want to know the answer, you gotta know, and you ask the question. That's the best. And but see, with those, even if I say no, they still try. And I had somebody recently who was like, I said no, and they're like, oh, I guess I'm just going to give up. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that you can't be that into the relationship. I mean, what I say to people is, don't bet the farm. Don't send them $1 million or something. You know what I mean?
Right. And I suppose
just keep it in the back of your mind. But I mean, how can you not go ahead and try on a relationship? If you care about it. So as opposed to a business partnership, they're like, okay, it looks like a bad deal. Like, okay, I won't do it. But it is one of those things of like, I mean, I think typically people will try to go ahead and, now sometimes people say, well, I get a talisman will change things. I'm like, probably not, because this is giving the flow of events, the mighty Mississippi flow, right? And are really able to go and change that with a talisman? Probably not. On the other hand, I had someone recently who asked a childbirth question, and it was very touch and go. It was interesting how it was right in the middle. I was like, and I said, in this case, if, I obviously can't guarantee the talisman's going to help you, but I said, this is where it might be worthwhile to do it. Because see, what I see a lot of magic is reality warping. Like, for example, if you play blackjack in the casino has a 1% advantage over you, but they can win all your money with that over time.
Yeah.
Now, if you count cards, you can get a 1% advantage over the casino, and they'll kick you out for that because they don't want to do that. Again, you win a lot of money counting cards with only a 1% advantage. Now, if you say to people, you can get a 1% advantage, like, why bother? That doesn't seem like much. But it's like, with the right person in the right circumstances, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, 1% is still 1%, right?
Yeah, but well, like I said, it depends on if you've got some idiot who, you're blowing all your money and you make 1%. It's not going to help you. You know what I mean? You kind of need to know what you're doing to be able to make effective use of that. Another thing with magic is like camouflage, right? I mean, camouflage is psychological. The thing is there, you just aren't seeing it. You know what I mean? It's blending into the background. It's not jumping out at you psychologically. You think, like, I do algol for protection, and I ask to be, basically, don't let them see me. That's even more effective. If your enemies don't even see you, that's even better than a wall or a shield.
How would that manifest? Like, their spirits just don't see you, or like their activity just
they don't pay attention to you.
Right.
It just doesn't really. I mean, the other thing, I never get into any kind of public squabbles with anybody.
Yeah.
Never have, never will. What's the point? I mean, that part of is that whole philosophy of like, that's fine. I mean, I don't have to argue about because I don't need to be right. I'm like, because there's lots of possible ways. I mean, I'm not even convinced. I'm just not wrong. I'm not right. I'm just not wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, because that's the problem. Like, oh, you have to do it this way, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, why is everyone so focused on that? It's like, clearly you've got, what I would say is there's no one right way. There's a number of sort of right ways, and there's an infinite number of totally fucked up wrong ways. Right.
Yeah.
But as long as you're in the more or less right way, more or less, then fine, and this is the thing, is like, why argue about minutia? Or it's an ego thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also comes from the fact that there's this belief that, there is one right way, and it must be mine. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. But I don't need to argue with people because it's like, whatever. I mean, if you do it your way, that's fine. I don't have to convince you to do it my stuff, or force you into it. So that helps right there. And then it's just like, like I said, I think that the algol, I've started doing daily algol, which is total overkill, because if you're going to do a fixed star every day, you need to be able to calculate the rising or culminating time.
Right. Well, I mean,
you have to know what you're doing, and it changes every day.
Or you need good aspects for it as well, right? So then, like whether it's the moon conjunct if it's a fixed star, or like the.
See, you can't do that every day though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like, how can you do it every day if like the moon's not?
You just do it right. Here's another one of my things that I sort of invented is that I differentiate between high intensity and low intensity interactions with the celestial angels.
Right.
So high intensity is one where you've got multiple electional factors that you're timing for that interaction, because every interaction has got some kind of astrological timing, because that's just respectful to the spirits to contact them in a time that's astrologically appropriate. But which factors used vary. So choosing a talisman with my method, I'll full chart election. So for example, sun talisman would be sun in Leo or Aries, in sign or exaltation. You could do multiple lesser dignities. I mean, you want to have probably at least +4 if you can help it. 3 is okay. 4 is fine.
Not that's essential, right? Like
not necessarily. It's nice, but it's not necessarily, essential. So okay. So sun in Leo, sun rising, either rising or culminating, because those are the strongest things, and then the planetary hour of the sun, and then the sun non-afflicted. So that's a lot. I mean, that's very, very, but that's only going to come up, for the sun, you can guarantee it's not going to be it couldn't be more than 8 times a year. And usually there's stuff interfering with those elections.
Yeah.
So if you do sun day, sun hour, sun rising, you can only do that 4 Sundays with suns in Leo, and 4 Sundays when it's in Aries. So what that means is it's very powerful, but it only happens at rarely, basically. And so if you're saying you have to do every election for the planet, no matter what the purpose is, as a full chart, all factor election, that means you can only do it, a couple times a year. So but that's high intensity. So you're obviously meeting them at a moment that's super powerful solar moment, right?
Right. Sure.
So that's high intensity. You could also just do an invocation without making the talisman. That's also high intensity. So low intensity is now high intensity, that's where I'm saying, like, maybe you want to check to see how it is in your natal chart.
Right.
Because you're having a pretty high intensity interaction. You want to check it out. Low intensity, I have a couple things for low intensity. So one of them is what I call the daily planetary practice. So daily planetary practice is the 7 days of the week. They all come from the planets, right? That's the origin of the week. Is Monday's the moon day, Sunday's Sunday, Saturn is Saturday. That's where they come from. Sure. And so on the day of the planet, I just do a really short invocation, and I do it every single day, and I've been doing it for like 20 years.
Is that planetary hour or sunrise?
No, I just do the day.
But like, do you time it do you time the invocation at the planetary hour on the day? Or
could, but I don't, because I do it at 8 o'clock, which is convenient for me to do it.
Oh, so you just do it like whenever, like regardless of planetary hour?
It's the day.
Okay.
Now, but the difference is this. It's like I've been doing it every single day, if I'm at home, for 20 years. So even though it's a very low intensity interaction, right? Now, that makes it safe too. I mean, I have Mars as afflicted in my chart, but it's fine to do planetary because it's a very low intensity interaction.
Right.
But the power comes from the repetition.
Mars talisman, that'd be different.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. Maybe it would be fine for me, but you know what I'm saying? It's like I don't have to worry about that with such a low intensity interaction, right? But the power of it comes from, I mean, think about this. I said this as an analogy. You have this friend and you only see him once a year, but you have the most intense thing. Like you go like parasailing and you travel to crazy places and you do all this amazing stuff with this person. Incredible. But you only see him once a year. Whereas you have this other friend you see like a couple times a week and you just hang out. Now, who would you have the better friendship with? Probably with the person you're seeing every couple days.
Yeah, because you're more familiar. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Even though it's not an intense, you don't have these super intense stuff. So that's kind of, and since when I'm thinking of my relationship with when I'm doing these talismans, to have a friendship with the planet, right?
Right.
That's my approach. I'm not saying it's the only approach, but that's my devotional style approach. It sort of makes sense. So the daily planetary practice is a low intensity practice that's repeated, right? And you don't worry about anything about what the current state of the planet is. You just go by that low intensity, like, Mars is retrograde. It doesn't matter for this one because you're only just timing it. Now you could do planetary hour too if you felt like it, right? But you basically just do planetary day or and planetary hour. And another one is planetary charity. Yeah. So planetary charity is probably the lowest intensity of all, because what you're doing is you're saying, this is from Vedic astrology, I adapted it. Say, I'm not getting along well with the planet. Like I said, it's afflicted on my natal chart, so I'm going to do charity. So it's Saturn. So I'm going to give on Saturn day, Saturn hour. I'm going to make a vow. I'm going to do whatever, 7 or whatever number you want to use for Saturn. There's a bunch of different listings of numbers. I'm going to do 9 times. I'm going to make a donation to a Saturn ruled person and homeless people, the unhoused, whatever the current euphemism is. You give, like, so Saturday, Saturn hour, you give you go on the street. I mean, homeless people you can find all over the place. So it's like, that's not a hard thing for people to find. Otherwise, people are typically doing like online donations. Like for Venus, it would be like, women's charity or like music or something like that. Arts, Mercury, like whatever, teaching. And you just figure out an appropriate charity for that planet. Yeah. You just make the vow and you just do it. And so that's even more low intensity because you're not even asking for anything.
Right.
You're doing it totally for the planet. You're trying to get along with them. So again, that's a low. And so in those, again, you don't, because what people do is they're like, well, I'm used to choosing all these factors, so I'll just do that. And if I don't do it, it's bad. So that's the thought process. It's something I'm used to.
Right. Well,
do it exactly what I already learned this, so I'm not gonna relearn anything, and I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And these are the two. Then people are like, oh, I'm not afraid. It's just, it really is dangerous. I'm like, okay, whatever. But you can see the logic of my approach, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's just, but you want to time it astrologically because that's respectful, right? That's aligning yourself. but it's a very low power, low intensity alignment, right? But the power then comes from the repeated repetition, and you can do it frequently. Like I said, if you just do fixed star, rising, or culminating, you can do that it's one opportunity, for every day. And you just do, so I'm doing algol every friggin' day. And that's overkill. Like I said, the other problem with it is it changes. It moves about 3 minutes earlier every day. So it's like totally inconvenient. It's constantly moving through my day, and I have to have a reminder on my calendar to check the time each day. So every day I've got to check the time, and then I got to remember to do it. And so it really is, it's really quite strenuous. And what makes me nervous about it is that people can get OCD about it. And then they get afraid if they miss it or it becomes burdensome.
Right. Algo will be angry with you.
Yeah. So you don't want to. What I'm going to do, I came up with this new thing. I called it a heavy sweep. I think what I'm going to do, offer this to people, I'll do the elections for people if they can't do it themselves, is that when you start off with algol, or if you want to renew your relationship with algol, what you do is do every day for a week, and then do it once a week for a month thereafter. So 7 days plus 3, right? So 10 total. And so that would be like a blitz, and then but that's it. You know what I mean? It's just like the planetary charity. You say, I'm going to do a blitz, and you say that to algol when you start. And the most important thing is don't, if you promise to do something, don't stop, don't not do it. Now, they're angels, so they're not going to fuck you up. It's not like it's like Virgin Mary, or St. Jude. Oh, I missed a prayer to St. Jude. He's going to blow my head off. No, it's not how it works. It's not demons. It's not jinn. That's why I like the devotional approach, because you can't get what you want necessarily, but they're not going to blow your head off because they're mad at you either.
Right. And it's like a gradual assimilation as well. And I suppose that's like a difference between, say, if you're doing like a high intensity talisman, like if you were to go down like the remedial, the Iatromathematica route, right? So if you were to assign the parts of the body, like I imagine it's like surgery, right? We were having
I don't think so. I don't think it's that powerful. I mean, like I said, again, I think that it's powerful in astrological terms, but I don't think it's that powerful. I mean, like I said, if you're going to do an experiment, you had 10 people and you did 10 astrological talismans for them, they ain't getting cured.
Right. But I mean,
they're not going to have some radical
difference between the two. So it's like a talisman, like you can compare it to say like it's like a surgical operation, but versus like the devotional practice is more like home remedies. You can get kind of similar results. You need.
Well, I mean, I'm doing talismans in my devotional practice.
Yeah, sure, but like not. I assume not as like high intensity ones, right?
Sure, it is. I mean, it's a regular talisman.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I mean, for the algol, I have an algol talisman.
Right. So
I suffumigate it. I suffumigate it, right? Which is classic. That's what you do. But the invocation is very short. I mean, it's like about a minute.
Yeah.
I light the candle. I have a votive candle. I light the candle. I light the incense. I have a very short stick. I use Japanese temple stick incense. I have like maybe 2-inch stick, really short. Light that, and then I do this really quick, and I suffumigate the algol talisman, and I do the invocation. So, I mean, the talismans, like I said, there's the thing, devotional versus magical approach, they blend into each other. You know what I mean? And it's not a good or bad. It's just that I happen to like the devotional stuff. So, but the devotional stuff, you can be, because the magical is more like I want a specific effect, and devotional is like I want a relationship. But you can't get an effect without having some kind of relationship. And if you have a relationship, you're going to get some kind of effects too.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's like, again, it's not a good or bad. It's not a wrong. It's whatever you're, and I ask for stuff too. I mean, I'll mostly more like, make sure the tornado doesn't blow us down, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That tends to be what I ask for.
Like
but I think that's so, but what I like about it is if you ask me about something, I can give you the logic of it. And that's what I think everybody would be wise to do, is to say, why am I doing this? What is my underlying basis for this? What is my underlying, and not in a rejected, because like I said, I wish people would embrace atheistic materialism. You know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, these are just different approaches. I mean, the idea that there's, I know what reality is. Like it's all discrete. I mean, I'd question whether there's an objective reality. I mean, we have no evidence. I mean, everything that we experience is subjective.
Yeah.
So how can we have this confidence? Oh yeah, if we got rid of subjectivity, there would be this objective thing. You could never see it. You could never experience it. No one ever experiences objective reality. And I don't even think God does. I think God's more like, the fly has a million facets in it, or has all those facets in it. So I think that's the way God sees. I think God sees through all eyes, or not. I mean, there's also consciousness. Like I said, who the fuck knows? I mean, I'm not in that position yet.
One of the open questions. Yeah.
But like I said, the objective reality, you have to believe in it as an act of faith, because we don't have any direct evidence of it. You're only, I mean, like I said, if you see something, what's happening is like, this is the scientific view. I mean, the light's bouncing out. Like I'm looking out the window now. It's a beautiful day. It's like 22 Celsius, which is an amazing day. And so the light hits the leaves, and then it reflects the green light because it absorbs everything else, but it reflects the green light. And then the green light goes to my eyes through the lens, right? And I have cataracts, so I have like, I'm a cyborg. And then it goes to my retina, right? And the retina picks it up and then, sends electrochemical impulses to the brain, right? And then it's perceived in mind, right? So everything we're aware of is just being perceived in mind.
Right. Everything in us is everything.
There's how do I know there's anything out there? I mean, it seems like it does seem like there's stuff going on, it seems like, but in terms of what's really happening, it doesn't go to the solipsism either, though. It's like, oh, whatever I want is the way it is. It's like, that obviously isn't true. Too. People have all sorts of misguided things that don't, that's what I really feel like the mage is the student of reality, and the student of how to act in reality. So,
right. I guess like with astrology, you're learning to like, well, even if we're going by like a Griffin, right? You're learning to see the occult virtues or what goes like that. Like
that's the underlying superstructure of reality.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can do stuff with it, and this is what I do as a lawyer too, because people are always calling me up and they're saying, what's the law? And I'm like, it doesn't get you very far to know what the law is. I said, for example, you can't drive more than 70 miles an hour on the highway. I said, so because it's illegal, no one ever does it, right? And they're like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like, what's the actual situation that you're in? It's like playing poker. What cards do people hold? The tells. It's very psychological and you have to understand and that's what I do. Like I said, as a lawyer, I do that all the time. It's like, let's read the situation, and then if we want to accomplish something within that situation, because I do landlord tenant law, for example, and people are like, oh, they're supposed to do this. I'm like, well, they aren't. What are you going to do about it? Like, that's terrible. How are you telling me this? And I'm like, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to, it's like, I mean, I broke my arm. Oh, that's terrible. I'm like, well, you can go to the hospital. No, it shouldn't have happened in the first place. I mean,
right.
You can deal with reality or not. You know what I mean? And it's like, so that's interesting. Like I said, I don't feel like the astrology and the law are that different.
Well, yeah. I suppose you can think of astrology like a natural law.
Well, yeah, I'm big into natural law too.
Yeah.
Another thing too, not in a Catholic way, but I wrote a book. I just wrote a book about the law of evictions in my state. And what I came to as a conclusion was that the law is just as common law says, law is discovered. It's not created by humans. It's not just made up. It's not conventional either. It's not just like made up. Once you have certain concepts, which natural is, it's funny you're talking about natural law, because, I was talking about, the decision making for people, when they can't make decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
What they did was to just take how you inherit. And the inherent stuff is natural law because it goes to your closest blood relatives. Because that's the assumption that everyone would want, that they're, and same thing with either their inheritance or their decision making. There hasn't been too much hullabaloo in my state because that fits with people's expectations and what they think should happen, right? Is that your blood relatives, and the closer the blood relationship, the more that you want that person to be either inheriting or making decisions for you. And that just comes from, same thing with like, why do you have to take care of your child support? Well, just like a bird takes care of its children, right? It's natural. And so where it breaks down is when you get into, homosexuality is against the law of God, kind of natural. I mean, and it's also like, in any particular circumstance, you can have a huge argument over what natural law says, which is not to say that doesn't mean that there's because you can always do that. Like, where to draw the boundary is always like, well, you can't have any boundaries at all because it's hard to draw boundaries. It's like, no. But I mean, I feel like the legal stuff is helpful because one of the things you have to learn to really be, and I do appellate law where you're not just at the trial level, but you're appealing it up to the appellate court of the Supreme Court. And those guys are they're smart and they're really good at understanding the underlying essence of things. But law is not a bunch of rules because the rules never fit. you always have these circumstances that don't fit the rules. So then what do you do? And so it's that getting the essence of what it's pointing at. It's important. The same thing with the astrological stuff or the occult stuff. It's like if you just literally follow, particularly if you literally follow with a modern understanding, you're going to be lost. You don't understand the essence of what they're after. And I mean, a good example of that is if you look at Picatrix's book 2, chapter 10, is kind of the inspiration for me. I just rolled out. I was telling you the factors. So I said, the planet in sign or exaltation, rising or culminating, and planetary hour. Right. If you look at book 2, chapter 10, they have recipes, and the recipes are sort of a little fragmentary because they'll be like Jupiter. They'll say like Jupiter exalted and rising, and then another one will say Jupiter in sign and planetary hour. They mix them up, right? So none of them do they say what I just said, but I'm able to look at that and say, if we look at all these 20 or 30 recipes, we can see this underlying structure, right? And the underlying structure is, again, they want them to be dignified in essential dignity. They want them to be dignified in terms of accidental dignity and placement, and they want it to be the planetary hour of the planet. Right? And then I add in the affliction, because that's part of the whole, that's so basic that it makes sense that you don't want to have the planet, even if it's dignified in these other ways, you want to have it afflicted, retrograde or something like that, or whatever. And so, but you can see the underlying logic of that, but you couldn't, if you follow the line by line, because that's what people do. They say, well, that's what the book says. I'm like, yeah, but, it's like, for example, there's no trespassing, but like, if you don't walk across the lawn, you're going to die, from gunshot.
Immediately,
right? But that's called a necessity defense. It says, if the harm that you're preventing by breaking the law is less than the law that you break, then you have a defense, right? But then that's going to have to be examined by the judge, or by the jury.
Right, and then again, it's contextual.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying? So like you said, the law gives you the general rules, and equity does justice in the individual circumstance, right? Law acts by doing justice by applying the same rule to everybody. But then you have to combine them in practice. That's what the judge does. And so this is what I say with the astrology stuff, is that, again, you have basically people either just making it up. That's the New Age style, right? Or people are like what I call text fascists or source fascists. And they just say you have to follow everything in the book. I'm like, why? Because the book says so. Like you have to you didn't do it that way. So it's wrong. Like, for example, typically in that book 2, chapter 10, they'll say, oh, make the talisman in a white crystal. You have to make it in a white crystal. I'm like, why? Like, because you have to, because the book says so. I'm like, okay.
Right. Well, it's also like you can only follow Picatrix so far unless you're like willing to do all the macabre, weird stuff.
Well, I don't do that because I'm a Buddhist, so I'm not going to be doing any confectiones. But I'm just saying that, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You can look at that and see that. I mean, for example, Thabit Kora says in De Maginimus, he says, you don't need to worry about the material. You can make it out of anything you want. What really matters is the astrological type. And I'm like, that's what I tend to follow.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about Quetta as well, because because they actually it reads to me like he's not kind of holding your hand in any kind of way. He makes the assumption that the reader is someone who's experienced enough in astrological magic to be like, material, that kind of shit doesn't matter. It's all timing.
It doesn't hurt. Like I said, if you're going to make a sun talisman and you are able to make it out of gold, that's good. Just like if you do the ceremony and you dress up like the sun, right? There's the Picatrix has sun clothing. That's good too, right? You could play the planets by Holst, and that would be good too. You know what I mean? It's like none of the stuff, but is it essential? Right? No, right? But then as you start taking pieces out of it, like you start saying, well, the sun doesn't actually have to be in sign, and the sun doesn't actually have to be rising, and it's like, and then you're getting some weak ass bullshit. You know what I mean? And then you're not ending up with it, or maybe you're not having anything at all. So but where you draw that line is going to depend on it's for a master. Once you're a master, you're going to have some idiosyncratic. You're going to have some stuff that you do your way. I mean, I do stuff like that. Like when I do horary, I have a tendency to really focus on the planet being close to a cusp, right? And that to me is really screaming to pay attention to that planet in that house, right? And so I tend to really focus on that. Or another one I do is I don't do like if for example, if the moon is applying to like first to Mercury and then to Saturn and then to Jupiter, a lot of times they'll say, oh, it's prohibited. It cuts off the aspect. And I don't do that. I just say, well, you're aspecting Jupiter, even though it's the third planet in the row, right? Now, that's not crazy within the traditional practice, right? But it is idiosyncratic. And so if I was to say that you have to do it that way, it's right. I'm like, no, that just happens to work for me. Because again, with Horary, what you're doing is you have this toolkit with 500 tools in it. Which ones work best for you, right? You're not going outside the tradition, but you're selecting the stuff that puts your intuition into play. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like you have to find a methodology that engages your intuition. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to be accurate. If you approach Horary as algorithmic, right? And I just the things work by themselves, and I can just run these techniques, and there's no intuition involved. It's not going to work for you. This is a problem. I mean, again, I was asking somebody about this. I said, what do these other people say? And they said, basically, they don't say it, but basically they treat it as that the techniques work by themselves. And see, that's not true. I mean, if you look at aphorism 1 of the Centiloquium, is attributed to Ptolemy. It says, you can only get so far basically with your technique, and you have to be inspired to get the full 100% accuracy, or highly accurate. And so that's exactly what I was saying. This is like, you're an oracle. You have to engage. So, I used to say when I did astrology, people was like, oh, you a psychic? I'm like, no, scientific. And now I'm like, yep, I'm intuitive. But I'm not like a psychic that I can just do it without any kind of, I'd have to have the chart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Like you have to have tarot cards if you do that. That just happens to be the way I do it. The other advantage of the medieval Renaissance astrology is it gives you a lot of information. You're already 50 feet in the air before you have to start doing your intuition. You've got a lot of information to work with, and you can choose between the chart. You choose between the chart options. You don't just make shit up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's funny though, because when you get into an area where there's a lot of confusion in the rules, like for example, lost items, it's all over the place, and I think that's to me a sign that's a very intuitive area. Lilly was really good at it. He has this famous story about how he found a fish that was stolen from him, and like I can't even follow it what he's doing, but he found it. So it's like, but I think that was more intuitive. He started with a chart, but then his intuition kind of kicked in.
Yeah.
I watched this famous astrologer do this at a conference years ago. And it was a question about like, will my mother sell her house? Right. And he was asking on her behalf. So she's the first house, she's the querent. And, the fourth is the house, and the seventh is the buyer. So it was like, she was afflicted and the buyer was a retrograde, and they were separating. So it's like, no. Then he went into this whole thing about this planet in the 12th house and this, and he was physical description of the new buyer and everything and the timing and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I couldn't follow it. He was right, but it was like, that was intuitive.
Yeah.
If it's not teachable, it's intuitive, which doesn't mean it's wrong. I remember saying it to a student. I said, it's intuitive. He got this really accurate thing. And I'm like, I don't know how you got out of the chart, because he did it right. He like did the prediction in writing in advance and sent it to me. Right. And then he got the results back, and I'm like, how the fuck did you do that? I said, that was intuitive. And he's like, oh no, it's not intuitive. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. You got the answer right. Right. If what you do is if you make a prediction, you write it down and you get the results back and it's accurate, there you go. You can use that methodology for anything, being psychic, any kind of divination, any kind of prediction. But that's the gold standard. That's the gold standard. It's like, you need to not know the outcome. You need to make a prediction. And if it's astrological, it needs to be astrologically based. You should list the factors, your analysis in writing, and then see what the results are. And if you just do that about 500 times, that's your postgraduate work.
Yeah.
Because you learn it like you should really. I don't know. You can't. Again, people would like to be able to learn it on their own. It seems like a lot of effort to have to take a course. Like, I don't want to do that, and I know best anyway. And it's astrology, so it's all easy. You can pick it up. Seriously, modern astrology, you can learn in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Not very hard, And and then you're an expert. And particularly if you're only looking at stuff you already know the answer to. It's funny because I don't want to be dumping on people, but I just sort of feel like I had two people recently get a reading from me and say, when's the appointment? And I'm like, first of all, I do all my stuff in writing, right? I don't do appointments. And the reason I do that is that I don't want to be cold reading the client. I don't want the because I get the sense that a lot of people, what they do is they don't even look at the chart until the appointment, and they jump on, and then the client starts talking to them, and they start going, "Oh yeah, that's Sagittarius. Oh yeah, that's Leo. Oh, that's the Chiron, right?" And it's easy when someone's telling you all this stuff, right? But also you just got it all mixed in there, whereas mine, I don't even know anything about the person except their date of birth, right?
Yeah.
And I'm getting an entire reading, right, on that. Now, it is useful to go back once you get the general stuff for that. People, ask questions, right?
Yeah, cool.
But, I just think it's very important not to have your, because otherwise, how do you know that you're not making a prediction?
Yeah. And you don't know what else you're drawing on if you're cold reading as well. Like you could be
exactly.
Like
that's not the same thing. Maybe it's more counseling or something like that. I don't know. Like I said, I just think that ends up being, I don't want to be censorious. I don't want to be saying that's wrong. But for me, since my thing is I came from horary, right? And I do Lily style horary, and it's very much like a horary reading.
Yeah.
And even in medieval Renaissance. And it's like, that's what I'm coming from. And the same thing in my course. When you take my course, my natal astrology course, you get a bunch of charts of people you have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
You never look at your own chart, and we do not do celebrity charts. So it's always predictive, and that's hard. That's a lot harder, and you can get it wrong. Whereas if Prince Charles, King Charles now, King Charles's chart, you're never going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
You can always be like making all these brilliant predictions because it's not a prediction, the outcome, and you can say it with great authority, So that's what I would say is like, I think that, I guess my theme has been that, again, I don't want to be coming in and saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong, because I do the same thing and a lot, but what I try to do when I'm working on it, this friend of mine was giving me all this advice. I said, what, I should take some of this advice. So that's what I would say about it, is that really the part of this is that, the willingness to see what you're doing, and to see and understand what kind of the games that yourself is playing with yourself, and see what's actually going on. And you just have to be willing to make mistakes. I mean, that's the thing with horror. You're going to get it wrong from time to time. I mean, it's just, that's, people, what's your accuracy rate? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's better than nothing, it's better than 50-50. It's better than just guessing. But it's not to say that I get it. But think of economics. When did they ever get anything right?
Yeah.
But that's a science, so that's okay. But it's like, it's not
the same judgment.
So that kind of ran out of steam. You have another question?
Well, I'm just happy to kind of we're going through it. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, I guess one of the ones I was that came up earlier that I was thinking about is if we go back to like prescriptive astrology in this context, we're talking about things being so contextual. We're approaching stuff like Iatromathematica, so assigning astrological things to body parts, or if you've got a certain planet that's afflicted or whatever, would your, like, when you, let's say you're doing a talisman or something, or finding some kind of way to like help an afflicted planet or improve your relationship with planet or something, would the way you approach it in terms of like which talismans you create or which activities you do, would it differ depending on what the affliction is? So like if it's within Venus, and Venus is in detriment versus if it's in fall, you would do.
You're talking about so here's the thing. Picatrix has a lot of illness talismans, right? But the conditions of those are tricky.
Yeah.
You'd have to do them in advance. You'd have to stockpile them.
You
can't like get sick and then think, okay, like for example, I have like, I have a foot problem, right? And its sun is in, Gemini. So I got to wait like 8-10 months to get that talisman. Do you see what I'm saying? Because see, a lot of these discussions are armchair discussions. You know what I mean?
Right.
People, they get a copy of Picatrix, they read it, and then they go on social media and start arguing about it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's like, wait a second, you got to make the thing. I mean, when I do health talismans, what I'm doing are basically, like, for example, that's one of the reasons I love the sun. The sun is so great because, I mean, it basically is okay because sun doesn't go retrograde, sun doesn't combust, so it gets afflicted by that. The sun's only got two signs it's problematic in, which is Aquarius and Libra. It's detriment and it's fall, right? And so its sun is good for almost everybody. And even if it's in Aquarius, it may still be okay for you if you do divination. But the sun has such great effects. It's like promotion, fame, authority, wealth, and health, because it's like the, rules the heart and everything. It's good for mood lifting. So as a general, like planetary one, I would say the sun is great for health. We also have some fixed stars like Capella and Centaurus as a constellation that are also supposed to be really good for health. So those are the ones I go with. If you're talking about, I want to make a talisman, I have a heart problem, make a talisman for it, it's not practical to do that because the conditions aren't going to be in play. And so what you could do is like make a whole set of those things. But then, if it got super popular and there was like a lot of demand, I could do that. Right. But this is the problem with it is like, it's funny because I had my first jeweler was an American, and he said to me, he was looking at this one of these archidoxes, it's attributed to Paracelsus. And he said, these aren't real. He said, because the conditions that you're supposed to leave it at a set temperature for 3 weeks. It's like, that's not doable. Right? Yeah. So a lot of, a significant amount of stuff no one ever, or it just got passed down and no one ever made it. Yeah. But when you start actually trying to make these things, like I said, that's the mismatch there with the health stuff is like, now you could do moon, right? I mean, I have a whole section in my astrological magic course in the advanced section about sign talismans, right? And the sign talismans are like, fitting that zodiacal man. You know what I mean? Yeah. What is it? Melanothesia? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, see, it's like a signing
whatever it is
thing,
which is perfectly traditional, and it makes. I mean, I agree with it. It's fine, but to do it, you're gonna have to like put the sun in the sign. Now you do the moon in the sign, right? So I have these different variations. Like you said, you could have like say you want to do Capricorn, right? You want to do a sign talisman for Capricorn. So like for knees, you got a knee problem. So you could have Capricorn rising, and you could put the sun in Capricorn, but that sun in Capricorn only happens, during that month, whatever that is. Or you could do, you don't want to do moon in Capricorn because moon is in detriment to Capricorn, so it's probably not the best. You could do Saturn. So what I would do is say Capricorn rising, and then Saturn, maybe Saturn planetary hour, and then Saturn unafflicted. See what I'm saying? You could see the logic of doing that way.
Will you put Saturn in Capricorn or just
that only happens once every 29 years.
Right. Yeah. So
so how are you going to do that? Yeah. And you could say that, that's what the book says, but then that means the classic thing someone said to me is they said, what people do is they astrological magic, and they open up the book and it says you have to make lead talismans for Saturn, tin talismans for Jupiter, iron talismans for Mars, sun, gold for sun, and they like, I don't have any gold. Okay, I give up. That's the end of it. So much, no more astrological magic. That's what the book says. I can't do it. So I'm like, think about other ways. I mean, it's true that the occult virtue of the sun resides in gold, right? But the occult virtue of the sun even more strongly resides in the timing of the chart, right? So you're going to have a much stronger, just a piece of gold isn't that solar a talisman.
Right, because I think you use all
bronze.
All bronze for everything, isn't it? For all materials.
Because here's why I use bronze. Because first of all, it's a really nice talisman material.
Right.
They're very attractive talismans, and they're hard wearing, right? Tin, you want a tin talisman? It's like a tin can, right? Lead, it's poisonous. Mercury is liquid at room temperature. I mean, this is a completely not functional, right? The problem with gold and silver is they're too expensive as materials. Yeah. And so you'll notice if you go to I wouldn't say my competitors, because I don't think of anyone as a competitor really, but if you look at other people making astrological talismans, what they do is they have a fancy website, beautiful website, and then they make things out of gold and silver and precious metals, and they have like 2 talismans in stock, and everything else is sold out. And they cost $5,000.
Yeah.
And this is the trap. I mean, the customer likes the idea of a gold talisman.
Right, because they have in their mind that, like,
solid gold. That's what they say too. Solid gold, 24 karat, pure gold, solid gold. It's like, okay, you can't make jewelry out of 24 karat gold. It's too soft, and it also doesn't pour very well. It's really a pain in the ass to work with. You can't do it. 18 karat is it if you're going to do it. 18 karat or 14 karat. But that's too practical. But see, if you're going to make, what I do is when I make talismans, we have a window, maybe an hour, so we can make 30, something like that, 40, I don't know. And then we stockpile them, right? And so then when people want to buy them, like I've had years when you couldn't make a Mercury talisman.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? Or like now, like Saturn, we had Saturn in Aquarius. Oh man, we had Saturn plus 10, Saturn plus 8. Amazing. I can't make a plus 8 Saturn talisman until 20, I think it's 15 years.
Yeah, well, because I think the only one, it's in face, isn't it? So we could do face talismans, but
yeah, but compared to plus 8,
yeah,
right? I mean, plus Saturn Aquarius is great.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful sign for Saturn. I mean, Aquarius is a air sign, so it's hot and wet, right? Saturn's cold and dry. It's so temperate. Plus, Aquarius is a great sign. I mean, I have my Saturn. I'm like Ficino. I have Saturn and Aquarius rising. And let me tell you, Saturn and Aquarius gives this ability of seeing the deep patterning of the underlying deep picture stuff. I mean, it's great. So, but you see what I'm saying? Like, we had to stockpile them. Now, if I made them out of silver, even silver, can you imagine how much it would cost to like stockpile a number of talismans? I mean, it's like you'd be spending thousands of dollars. So that's, again, you're going to look at people 2 years from now and nobody's except me is going to have any Saturn Aquarius talismans, you know, because it's just like, and so like I said, to me, the fact that it's made on all these great is more important than it's not made out of lead. Now, you don't want a lead talisman anyway; it's poisonous.
Yeah.
So the occult virtue is stronger. I have this whole discussion of this in my fixed star book about this. You know, the occult virtue is so much stronger from other things than the material. But see, with atheist materialism, the point is, it's like obviously all that exists is matter and energy. The causality is energetic, and the magic comes from the physical thing, right?
Yeah.
Like crystal healing. I read this. They said it's energetic. It's like crystals, like a quartz watch has, energy in it. And so it's just the same thing. It's like a quartz watch. Like, no, and so that the whole atheistic materialism, that's why people, I mean, it's funny, like with the Greater Key of Solomon, people will be like, it says you have to make it out of lead. Like, yeah, it also says you can make them out of parchment. It also says you make everything at the planetary of Mercury. That's all crazy, which they ignore. I said the other thing is that nobody ever does that Greater Key of Solomon ritual. It's too much effort.
Yeah.
So they toss all that out, but they do keep the materials. They're absolutely total source fascist about the materials. Like, whatever. I mean, the thing about it is that for me, it's a practicality thing.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to do this, you can't have solid gold, pure gold talismans. You know what I mean? It's not going to do it. So I'm like, it's maybe that I don't even think it's that much of a compromise. And it's certainly supported by traditional sources. It's not the majority view, but like I said, Thabit Ibn Qurra says you can use any material you want. Just get the timing right. And so that's what I would say about it. And it's like, but if they're like, oh, what a gold talisman, I'm like, okay, gold is $2,200 an ounce right now. So just for the materials. And then how are you going to get an election? I mean, people are always emailing me saying, oh, I want a talisman made of this particular thing at this particular time. I'm like, we don't do custom talismans.
Yeah.
It's like, good luck. Good luck finding somebody who's going to do it at a particular time. It's not that easy to do. So, but that's the saying. The bronze gives us the advantage of it's nice. Like, it's like the Olympics. You got the gold medal, silver medal, and bronze. There you go. So that's kind of that association is positive. It's a great material. They look beautiful. Very hard wearing, and they're not so expensive that we can't make them and stockpile them.
Yeah.
And that way you can save all that energy or whatever you want to conceptualize it. You know what I mean? You've got some amazingly powerful talismans. Now, I mean, I have undoubtedly have the greatest selection of astrological talismans of anybody. I can't believe anyone had, like I said, because I look at other people's websites and they're like, they just have this sort of smattering of things, and most of them are sold out because they could only make, like I said, gold and silver. You can only make a few.
Yeah.
Because it's too expensive. You can't have 500 talismans and they're all gold. Now, some places do, like some of the bigger jewelers, but those guys, the astrological talismans are just kind of another product line for them.
Yeah.
They have 5,000 other things that they're doing, and they do those. They do them a thing, but it just depends. Like I said, there's like, I mean, I don't want to be down on anybody because I said I think there's plenty of room for everybody. But the way I do stuff is like, I have a logic behind everything that I do. And it's like, certainly, it is kind of funny that since I'm the guy that brought all this out, that I'm somehow wrong. Like I said, it's like, how are everything you're doing is based on my work, yet I'm wrong. I'm like, okay, right. Well, maybe I don't think so. But what I would say about it is I'm not necessarily right, but I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're wrong. I mean, people can do different stuff. It doesn't mean that, I'm not insisting that they're wrong either. It's just like, it does seem a little harsh to be like, Chris Warnock, the father of the astrological magic revival, doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like,
it doesn't
strange, kind of a strange concept. But,
yeah. I mean, do you
go
use
ahead.
I can't remember what the name of it is now. Lily and Agrippa talk about like the different aspects of degrees and stuff. So like smoky, pitted, empty degrees.
Yeah, right.
Do you use it? Like, do you use any
No.
of those? Have you found any of
I
those?
mean, what I love about medieval Renaissance is they like, there's all this stuff, and here, like, take a look at this stuff. Now we never use it.
Yeah.
I do that myself to my students all the time. Like, I make them learn all the orbs and moieties stuff, and they're like, don't worry about it. It's very traditional, like I said. But see, the thing is, modern is if I don't understand it and I, it doesn't fit in with my modern approach, then I just toss it.
Yeah.
Whereas the traditional view is like, well, this is what's in the books, but we don't use it, but that's okay, just so you should know about it.
Yeah.
But what you could do is, like, for example, I've always said somebody could be the orientality guru, right? Because there's this whole complex. If you go back particularly to the Arabic stuff, like the 8th, 9th, and 10th century stuff, it's so complicated. But they have all these cycles, and it's different for the inferior versus the superior planets in terms of their cycle with the sun. And so they'll go under the sun's beams and then combust and then retrograde, and there's all this sort of stuff, and there's a whole cycle to that. And so every position in that cycle has meaning. We don't use it, but it doesn't mean you couldn't if you didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
You could revive that, and that could be your thing.
Yeah. I mean, have you found that, like, have you used any of like a
No,
degree
not
thing?
that kind of stuff. I mean, again, it's one of those things of like, that's a good thing for people to argue about. Like, I understand the underlying pouring of this and blah 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 blah, and everyone else is like. There's this articles about like the meaning of the bounds and the terms, right? And I don't even freaking know. People ask me, do you use this or this or the Chaldean or Ptolemaic? I'm like, I don't even know. I'd have to look it up, because to me that stuff is like, it's another one of those things of like that the technique is all, right? But it's like arguing over whether the Linux is better than Windows is better than Apple. You know what I mean? You just whatever operating system. I mean, you got to use an operating system, but like whether inches is better than than meters. It's like, who cares? That sort of stuff. It's like they're tools. They're tools for you to use. And I use the traditional ones. I use the one that are given to me by that. Now, I break that in that I do use the outer planets like a fixed star. I kind of like, I don't like Pluto for some reason, but I like Uranus and Neptune as a point, as a sensitive point. It's kind of like an Arabic part to me.
Right.
It gives you, it's like a tertiary significator. It can be useful. Like, someone's like, will I marry X? And you have Neptune in the 7th house. It's like, illusion and confusion. Maybe you're not seeing the situation clearly. Gives me a little bit of useful additional information, And so, but that doesn't overthrow. I've just kind of moved it into my system.
Yeah.
As opposed to breaking all the pieces of the traditional and shoving into a modern system. That's people don't realize that they have an operating system, right? That the modern astrology is this more or less coherent methodology. And has an underlying philosophy too, unconscious atheistic materialism. It's like it's a methodology, and it's like people are always like getting surprised when I'm like I said, they do astrology. It's like people from Middle Easterners. There's no difference between Israelis and Palestinians. They're all Middle Easterners. It's like, wait, the schools are very different. They have this Hellenistic versus medieval Renaissance versus, because I do think that if I look at, I don't see a whole huge difference between Bonatti and Lily, right? I feel like, I have a tendency when Lily starts to get modern to go back to Bonatti, like for example with the triplicity rulerships, right? I use the day and the night mixed rulerships, stuff like that. But that's you can use the Lily stuff, and it doesn't mean you're it doesn't make that much difference. Arguing over that stuff is not. There's a lot of people arguing about that like it's important. To me, it's not.
Yeah, because I remember like in the astrological community, especially with regards to like astrological magic, like astrological magic's become a bit more accepted in the astrological community in general in the past 2 years. But like I remember a time when a lot of people kind of, it was like early on, back in like the early 2000s, so like people were coming out against Lily, and they were kind of very like people were kind of like anti-Lily a little bit.
Anti-Lily.
Yeah, like it was like
that's
early.
That's a very strange attitude.
People were trying to like get away from Lily and stuff because they thought it was like too Christianized and things, which is really weird.
It's not.
Yeah,
you had to put that title on there because again, that's one of those so politicized. It's like he had to put that title on to cover his butt.
Yeah.
But I'd be damned if you can find anything Christian
Yeah.
specifically in that in the Christian astrology. It's like it's just one of those things. Is like people understandably have had bad experiences with the fundamentalist mainline stuff, right? And I know I did too, and so they're just really prejudiced against anything that says Christian, you know. And it's like I'm sure if it was like what LGBT or whatever astrology, then it would be more popular. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's kind of the thing. It's like it's just a labeling. It doesn't really have anything to do with the underlying stuff. And it's um the but I think that you've got um a lot of stuff because you want to be anti, because that raises your like, oh, I'm against Lily, like just as a way of raising your own stature.
Right. It's naturally
It's sort of reactive, like, oh, well, this is the authority, so I'm different. You know what I mean? It's like, but I think that I don't see any reason to change Lily because he's so brilliant. I mean, I can't come up with anything better than him.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own individual stuff, but I can't, I couldn't. I mean, if I did a Horary textbook, it would be very strongly Lily based. I mean, I might be a little more explicit about like he doesn't talk about causality because he's still in a spiritual causality basically.
Right.
He started to do a transition over to mechanistic, thinking, but for the most, because they started doing stuff like, that's that whole natural magic stuff, right? Is that there's these, that works automatically, like Ficino like that, or Albertus Magnus, they're talking about talismans. They're like, oh, well, all you have to do is put a picture of a scorpion on it with Scorpio rising and it kills scorpions automatically. There's no demons involved. And I'm like, I don't think so. To me personally. I mean, I suppose occult virtue or whatever. I mean, there's that, but to me, everything's alive anyway.
It's already animist.
It's already it's already alive. So it's like the rays or beams or whatever. I think, and again, they were pushed towards that because they didn't want to be accused of, working with demons.
Yeah.
But and the moderns like it because again, it doesn't anything. It's you can attribute this sort of pseudoscientific causality to it.
Right.
That's the way that works. But it's just so good. I ran out of steam again. Yeah, get me going again. You're doing great. Another question.
Yeah, no. So I'm thinking, like, yeah, because one of the, like, this discussion of like animate and stuff, it reminds me. Okay, yeah, this is a good direction to go. One of the ways I've been approaching it recently is like astrological magic as kind of like I wouldn't say a precursor, like it's a good inroad into understanding like Neoplatonic theurgy. Like if you're looking at like Iamblichus or Proclus. And if you read like on the Hermetic art and stuff like that, like Proclus is in a similar kind of boat where he's saying, all things pray. There's the chains of causation still, it's just the chain of being in some kind of way. It's like astrological magic is a good way kind of getting into understanding theurgy and how theurgy works, the idea of cosmic sympathy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
Like you look at Picatrix, they're like, oh, we got these Huronian, Sabian planetary invocations, which were religious, spiritual for them, right? And we kind of adapted them to use it for talismans. Because the magical use of things, like I said, is kind of an approach, which is like, I want something to happen specifically. So I'm trying to get this thing to happen. And I'm using the underlying spiritual connection of things to do it, right? And so, and you can do astrological magic, like I said, totally in a modern approach, right? And like an energy, right? And that wouldn't get you any closer to Neoplatonic theurgy. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But if you start thinking about how does this really work, or what's an alternative model to the energy model, right? And then how could you use this in a more devotional practice or a more spiritual, practice, right? How can I experience, how can I do this invocation and experience, different states of consciousness or something like that, right? Then yeah, definitely. I mean, magic and astrology are applied spirituality. Right?
Yeah.
They're applications of the underlying, this sort of philosophical or visionary understanding of the nature of reality. So, I mean, that's just always what I've been kind of like intrigued with and wanting to do. See, the thing is that the spiritual work that I've done has been predominantly like in Zen first, and then this modern non-duality. And are you familiar with that?
Well, mainly sort of through mainly through Hermetica, right? So
yeah, but I'm talking about something like Adyashanti or like
not as much. My basis.
Yeah, the modern. This is a modern thing. Now, essentially, what it grew out of was of Zen and Advaita Vedanta, but essentially,
I'm familiar with Vedanta. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it's a sort of view of, no self, right? And so it's Buddhist in that sense too, anatta, and seeing that, having it's a wisdom path, it's an inquiry path, right? And so, but whereas I think astrology, a theurgy, is a tantric path, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a ritual and a magical,
it's embodied
experiential path, right?
And
so, so it's a little odd for me because I've had I can't say I to have an experience of no self. I didn't have an experience of no self, obviously.
Yeah, there's no I.
But the Kensho experiences that have been experienced came through this modern non-duality. So insofar as I've had these there have been higher experiences that have been experienced, it wasn't through a tantric, it wasn't through an astrological. Now, Picatrix, that whole, what is it? Perfect mind? No.
Perfect nature.
Perfect nature. Excuse me, I'm blanking. Yeah, the whole perfect nature stuff. That's theurgic, most definitely. And hopefully somebody's going to run with that, right? It's kind of interesting because you've got this funky, like, Sun and Aries, and then you have these names of the spirit, right? Which is very standard. But then you've got this very exalted hermetic, explanation of, perfect nature and all this sort of stuff. It does view astrology like perfect nature is the spirit of the mage united with the planet ruling in your chart.
Yeah.
Right? But that's because that's who you are. I mean, all of us are these interesting kind of, interconnect, inner drops of 5 drops of Saturn and 3 drops of Venus, and you know what I mean. There's all these common interconnections of all these different planetary forces, right? You can see, you look at your chart, you can see how everything combined. It's like a snowflake, right? Yeah, it's unique, but they're all along certain similarities, bilateral, symmetrical, and everything like that. So that's what I would say about it, is that I think it's really great that the magical, there's nothing wrong with magical, but I love the fact that people are now when I'm doing with the, like I said, the daily planetary practice with my book, The Celestial Way, is putting out this devotional practice as a bhakti path. And you need to have that bhakti balance. If you're doing the wisdom yoga, you need to also have a devotional balancing to that too. You need a love and compassion and emotional, side to it as well. And so, but the most important thing is to experience it. You see, what most people are doing is they're reading about it and they're arguing about it on social media.
Sure.
That's it. And there's no experiencing of it. Like, so theurgy, you got to want to do it. You know what I mean? And sort of like that's what I think has been lacking in the stuff. Or what you get is just sort of dressed up Golden Dawn,
Right. It's the Golden Dawn version of theurgy or whatever, which is interesting. It's not that it's any less. Like Golden Dawn's still valid. It's still a good system. It's not iambic in theurgy. It's not Hellenistic theurgy.
I mean, it's just it's just funny with Golden Dawn stuff. It just, because I was a Mason, I am still a Mason actually, but I mean, it just seems so Masonic. Yeah. It seems so Masonic to me. It makes me laugh. What I mean? It's kind of funny. Where'd you get that idea from? They have a Tyler and everything.
Well, because all the original founders were all Master Masons anyway, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it had such a pervasive influence. And what's funny then is the Golden Dawn itself has such a pervasive influence. You ask people about magic, and it's all either Golden Dawn or a reaction to Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
That's all there is. So like the stuff that I was doing with Picatrix is like, it just was so far. I mean, it's funny, like Enochian, so popular. It's just this weird little byway, that D came up with. And yet it's become so popular, it's just, but it's way outside the mainstream of Renaissance magic. And nobody does Renaissance magic, right? They might call it that, but they're not actually, I mean, it's more of a label thing.
Yeah.
And, it's again, like I said, the theurgic stuff, I see stuff out there, like there's some books on it, but I just don't, it hasn't quite, I mean, maybe it'll never be that popular because it's just too advanced for people. But I do believe though, there's, it's like the Buddhists are like 84,000 gates to enlightenment. I mean, there is not a Western Tantra, that we killed off all our esoteric lineages.
Well, I think theurgy probably was the Western Tantra.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I agree. But we just don't have any living we don't have a living. You have to revive everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do with astrological magic.
They don't have any living master like theological masters anymore in the West.
No, they're not around anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to do Buddhism, as debased as that can be. You know, American Zen Buddhism is so debased.
Mm.
You know, it's funny because they want Sunday school. Like, if someone said, "Well, do you have Sunday school?" I'm just like, what the fuck? You know, it's like, what does Zen have for children? I'm like, nothing. You know,
Yes.
it's like not. They just look at wanting cool Christianity. You know, sense of community, and you know, someplace to go on Sunday and everything. It's like, and they don't even believe in enlightenment. There's no enlightenment. So that's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, you can come into a Buddhist scenario and not believe in enlightenment. Yeah,
it's just, you know,
what?
It is really, really weird. But it does seem to me that the Buddhism seems to me to be the best operating system for me, right? And it fits really nicely. I mean, I sussed your way. I've got a bunch of examples of like how astrological magic is integrated into Buddhism already. You know what I mean? They just take the celestial beings as divas, basically. I mean, for example, in Shingon, which is Japanese tantric Buddhism, one of their major mandalas has all these, you know, like Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, got hundreds of beings in it, and right around the edge, they've got like the 28 mansions of the moon and the 7 planets. You know, they're in there. You know, they're already integrated in, and then they have all these like, you know, star mandalas, and there's a star mandala Buddha. There's this Buddha of light who's got this always depicted a mandala with the 7 planets. You know,
well,
so that's
even the mansions are basically like the earliest source is Hindu, isn't it? It's Vedic astrology.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's like the Vedic, they got 27. I put that up. I stopped saying that because someone says, well, it's not really 27 nakshatras, but it really is. I mean, someone who's going to show how much they knew about Vedic. And I know nothing about Vedic. Making a big deal about, you don't know anything about Vedic. I'm like, oh, I won't mention it anymore. But the moon orbits the Earth in 27.5 days. So 28 days or 27 nakshatras makes sense. But see, the Vedic is like they have planetary rulership. And the Western, you've got some kind of halting systems, but the reality of it is the 28 mansions are the moon, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because like Solar Fire, they've got the, you know, the Saturn in the 13th mansion. I'm like, who gives? It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what mansion
they're different, right? Because like you can use like if you're using planetary thing, the planetary aspect, it's completely different system to like if you're making a lunar mansion talisman.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's its own thing.
Yeah.
You know, and the lunar mansions to me seem like magical.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's much predictive. I mean, I've got this one little fragment of a natal, and it's like, you know, your natal moon in the 13th house, and you get sick all the time. I'm like, something like that. You know what I mean? Useless. And you know, it does seem like predominantly magical.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the main use of it. And that's another funky thing where you've got these multiple traditions. You know, you've got Picatrix Book 4, Chapter 9, which has got the image of the talisman, the purpose of the talisman, incense, and then the name of the mansion lord, right?
Yeah.
So you can use that. That's workable. Book 1, Chapter 4, it says, you know, you can make talismans for these purposes, but it's all different. It's like they're like, sometimes they're contradictory, sometimes they're the same. It's all over the place. And then there's a third tradition in Astromagia, which is kind of a sister book of Picatrix, that's got, you know, whole another set of them. It's got some overlap but it looks like there's 3 different traditions. So like, which one's right? Or people want to mix and match. They'll take the image from Book 4 because it's got an image. So even though it's an image of love and they're making a talisman of destruction, they use the same image.
Yeah.
Like, well, because they're all mix and match. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so.
Like Kura, because Kura he has a specified images all the time, or he makes it like deliberately vague. Like there was one that came up recently, it was like last month. There was a really good one for his it was his house talisman for, I think it's a house talisman for business, like making an image of business. Whether
what was this?
Ibn Kura in
right.
There was a time, like we had one last month in the community I'm working in. There was a good time for making one of the Ibn Kura's talismans for business. Like it's one that says, was it making the image of business, put the ruling planet on the ascendant, have it trine the moon, whatever, that kind of thing. But he's deliberately vague. Like he says you should just make an image of business. He didn't specify.
I think there's also the translation we have of De Imaginibus had a bunch of stuff taken out of it. And I think there's an Arabic version that's got like mansion lords and has more detail in it.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you translated the Latin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the Arabic.
So this is the thing is that, and I'd love to have that out there, but it's just one of those things. The house talismans are so bizarre because planetary you can kind of get in terms of like, okay, what are we doing? We're dealing with the planet, and it's got certain natural rulerships, like the Saturn is good for wisdom and long life and everything. The house space stuff is weird because it's like what do you do for the invocation? Now I invoke the planetary rulers of the houses.
Right. I did.
But it's sort of like it is a little bit trying to wrap your head around what you're actually dealing with. It is kind of weird, and I think that's what I would say though is it's what I think of them as like a repertory theater, and you got 7 planets, 7 actors, and they have 12 roles that they can all play, and all of them can equally play those roles. Now it's nice to have Saturn ruling the second if you want a wealth talisman. That's the bonus. It's like Clint Eastwood being a cowboy, right? But any dignified planet as the ruler of the second house will bring wealth, as the second house ruler. So, but that's interesting. Like I said, that's sort of kind of interesting. It makes sense on one level. Then you start thinking about it. You're like, what are we dealing with here? It'd be nice to see the invocations from Fabio to see where he was coming from. But there's a lot of stuff out there. There was some Italian professor in the 80s or 90s who was going to release. There's a series. I forget the name of the publisher. It's even more like academic than Brill. And they had this series called Hermes Latinus, and they released the what is it?
Like the Latin America.
Yeah, no, it's the one with the mansion stuff. It was I forget what the name of it is. It's a really early Hermetic text.
No, I know there's a few in Arabic. Like you have the pseudo.
No, this is like in Latin, I think. Right. But and then there was one on just some fragmentary stuff. But there was going to be a book, and he listed the titles. It was all these different titles, like the Book of the Moon, the Book of the 7 Rings, all this sort of stuff. And I was salivating over it, to get, because it would have been in Latin, right? Well, you could translate it. It never got released, And so there's a bunch of manuscripts out there that would be really cool to get a hold of. And like for example, the fixed star book that I did, the translator did it, and then I sort of did some commentary on it. That was cool to have. I mean, I've got another one where it's like Camillo Leonardi, I think is the name of it, and it's got a lot of fixed star stuff, but it was variant. It had some really interesting stuff in it. It was different from some of our other sources. I did a Cygnus talisman based on his because it was like riches, wealth, knowledge, love. I'm like, wow, this is great. This is hitting all the different things. So we continue to have a certain accretion of new sources from the Renaissance and Middle Ages. The other thing that would be nice to have is to get people that were getting direct stuff from the spirits, direct, themselves, like visions. And
right. So especially like the wider fixed stars that we don't have, like invocations.
That's how you do it. Not some mechanical means, right? But somebody like, for example, Fomalhaut is very prominent in my chart. And so I just felt like I just could feel a connection there. And so I decided I was going to do Fomalhaut, and I did a sort of like, did a sigil, and somebody was hassling me about that. Like, how did you do it? And I'm like, I just drew it and it just felt right to me. I said, it's like, like that was illegitimate. And I'm like, what do you think artists get their inspiration from anyway? You know what I mean? Somebody has, some physical person has to create it, right? But what's the source? And but I did a divination. It was very positive. So it's like, but the Fomalhaut's easy because it's a southern fish. So it's fishy. Like I did a fishy looking sigil, and like you use like blue as the color, and you can use like fish incense if you wanted or the sea or something like that if you want to do incense for it. So it's like all that stuff is like, that was pretty easy. But that's what I think though that my feeling is that you want to come from an honest, desire and connection, as opposed to like, oh, I want to do I'm going to do all 72, whatever, just to do it.
Yeah, like just work like my little checkbox.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's, or I mean, it's sort of like to me like a judge. I mean, you can call him up and talk to him if you have something you need to talk to him about, but you don't just randomly call him up. Same thing with the celestial spirits. They're not just waiting around to do shit for you. That's my attitude. But it is weird to me that people, you feel like you can order somebody around, and I mean, I don't feel like I can tell the celestial archangels what they should be doing. I can ask them for a request, but it's like this idea that I could like bind them or something. It just seems weird. I mean, anything that I could kick around like that, how powerful would it be? If I can tell, if I'm more powerful than it, you know what I'm saying? It does seem to me to be an odd idea about the Solomonic stuff. It's that somehow the mage is so all powerful that they can make the spirits do stuff. I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but you can say it just didn't appeal to my particular personality.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I quite like the. I've been going through like the Greek, like mainly Hellenistic. Like most of them are in Byzantine, but like a lot of the technical Hermetica, we have them in like the catalog of Greek astrological texts to preserve it. Like the original scholarship was done in Latin, like the commentary in Latin, the original text in Greek. They were done back in the 1800s, like early 1900s. And it's the whole bunch of technical Hermetica, like the Periseismon, the Brontologion, Hermes on the 12 zodiac, on Hermes on the planet, on the herbs of the 7 planets, like that thing. And it's in like Byzantine Greek or sort of Koine Greek, right? So, I did enough of Koine Greek to kind of figure enough of it out to form a basic translation, and they are quite an interesting text. So we've got 2 from the Byzantine manuals, which are Hermes on it's mainly astrological herbalism. So it's like picking herbs and then like how different herbs are assigned to different parts of the body. But you've got one that's you pick the herbs when the moon, like, so the planet that rules the herb is in its sign, whatever it is. You pick it in the hour of the planet of the domicile lord, and then the moon is trining the sun, basically. And then you have to pick the herb when the sun is in exaltation, either in Leo or in Aries. So like well dignified, and then planetary hour of the domicile lord, while the moon is obviously trining the sun.
Then you're gonna go do it. Have you ever tried doing that?
Yeah. So I've done a bit.
Hard. That would
really
be a bitch.
hard.
There's too many factors in the election. I mean, did you say it have to be? Did you say that the domicile lord has to be in sign?
No, it doesn't spend. Hold on, wait, where is it? I can actually get it up. Give me like 2 seconds here. I can find what it is. But I like the planetary hour that you pick it in is of the domicile lord, whatever.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. If it's a planetary hour, and then you said the moon has to be trining the planet.
Yeah, where is it here?
That would be a bitch.
It's I can't remember. It's the planet exactly. Where is it? Here we go. Right, here it is. Here it is. Here. Yeah. So this is like this is my general translation. I've got these herbs must be gathered and made into a juice. So it's like pulverized down into a poultice kind of thing. When the sun is exalted, sort of in Aries or Leo. But it's also necessary that each herb is collected when the moon is trining the sun or in its horoscope, which is an interesting, because like they use horoscopos there, which is kind of weird. Each according to the zodiac sign it belongs to and the moon's position. So like the sign that's ruling the herb. He goes, and let the day and hour be the ruler of the zodiac sign or that rules the herb. So
so there's 2 different things, because one is the pulverization always has to take place during the sun exalted or in sign. That's separate, sounds like a separate thing.
They always have to be picked during either Aries or Leo, and also made.
No, wait. You said they had to be. Oh, you mean they have to be picked and pulverized?
That's kind of how it's.
Like, that doesn't make any sense to say everything has to be when the sun is exalted or in sign.
Yeah, they use K, which is and, right? So these herbs must be gathered and made into a juice when the sun is in Aries or Leo.
And this other stuff?
So it's
impossible.
You pick and grind. Yeah.
It's impossible.
But it's also necessary for each herb to be collected when the moon is trining the sun in its sign. I don't think it would be though, because like you just wait until the sun is in Aries or Leo, and then you wait for the moon to be in the same sign that rules the herb.
Yeah, but okay, so you can only do it 2 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And then during those months, the moon has to be in the sign.
In the sign that rules the herb, basically. So
and trining the planet.
And trining the sun, yeah, apparently.
Not possible. It's not possible. It's too many factors. It's impossible. And the planetary hour and day? No, absolutely impossible.
Yeah, it's just the planetary hour.
You'd have to choose.
Ruler of the zodiac.
Here's what I would do with that. I would pick it apart, okay? So you say, first of all, drop the sun shit, right? Because that's not applying to any, it's not, you know what I mean? Saying it doesn't make sense to me, right? Because that's just making the sun strong, right? It doesn't really fit
it's just an area with the herb. It's exalted, yeah.
So take that out, take the sun out completely. Then you're left with the planetary day and hour of the like for example, whatever, let's say St. John's wort, which is ruled by the sun, right? So that needs to be sun, day, and sun hour, with the moon trining in the sign and trining the planet.
It's like trining the zodiac sign that rules the herb. So like trining, so in that case.
Oh, the sign, the moon trining the sign. Is that what you said?
Well, trining the planet that rules the sign. So like in the case of
the moon in the right sign and trining the planet that rules the sign.
Yeah.
That's impossible again.
Yeah.
And the planetary day and hour, dude, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's like I said. What I would say about it is that you need to. I would probably do planetary day and hour. I mean, that's totally traditional in terms of the herbs, right?
Sure.
I mean, cole pepper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of thing. If you want to really get jiggy with it, you could just say, okay, moon in the sign, and say rising or something like that. You could say moon rising in the sign that rules the herb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say moon making a positive aspect, either a conjunction, sextile, or trine to the ruler. You could do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be separate. You'd have to do planetary hour or the moon in the sign or those, because otherwise you're not going to be able to do that stuff. I mean, you'd have to. Yeah. You could wait 50 years and you wouldn't be able to get your herbs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And also, you need to go gather them. Like, for example, the herb has to be growing, right?
Right.
So what the fuck if it's like the middle of the winter?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about that? How are you going to?
Because it was specialized. The sun has to be in Aries.
See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? So
yeah.
It's like this is the difference between me, where I'm spending a lot of time looking out to do my schedule, right, to my jeweler, and I'm thinking about, like, okay, is this going to be something that's going to be popular? Are people going to, like, for example, like Arcturus is good for stopping the flow of blood. That's it, as a fixed star. I'm like, no one's going to buy that. I've never made Arcturus talismans because there's just completely no demand for that, right? And so that's one thing I think about. Now, I do want to make sure there's stuff like wisdom talismans. Yeah, it's not my most popular talisman, but I think it's very important to have those. So I do make sure I do love wisdom talismans. It's important. Cool. But so I'm balancing. Okay, well, then I got to look and see what's available, right? What's even possible to make, and then design, and then all that sort of stuff. So, and I'm thinking about, like, for my poor jeweler, I don't really want to make him get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? And I'm like, I don't want to put 10 things on one day. It won't work. You know what I mean? There's a lot of practical considerations that come into it. But just in terms of finding stuff, see, that's the other thing too, is that I have a technique that I developed for finding elections. And what you do is you rank all your factors from slowest to fastest, right? And then that gives you the breakdown. Like I said, like we're talking about the sun, I'm like, okay, look at that. I can say automatically that means you're limited to 2 months, and when the sun is in Aries and sun is in Leo, right? So then that's all you have to look at is those 2 months. And then you look at the other factors in terms of that. So, but when you combine all those factors like that, it's fucking, I mean, seriously, to have sun, day, sun hour, sun rising can only happen on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. And so that means you have about, like, if you do a sun Leo or sun Aries, you have between 4 or 5 Sundays when that's possible. So you just click through those Sundays, and then, because I'm trying to get moon unafflicted, man, the moon fucks you up, or the sun is afflicted. I mean, just that is hard enough. But what you just raked off to me, it's like, it's fucking impossible.
Yeah.
It is. It's not. It's never going to be. So what you want to do with that is you got to break it down to it, because your choice is to say, okay, then if it doesn't do exactly on the book, I'm just not going to do it at all, and it's just going to be deadly. It'll cause cancer. Well, I'm like, no, let's break it down. Let's see let's see. Because I think probably what they did is they rolled them together.
Probably.
They probably just said, these are the possible ones. And the scribe he never made them. He just started copying the shit down. Who knows? But like I said, you can see that the purpose of this is to try to capture the occult virtue, or try to align yourself. And the herb is under the rule of the planet, right? Yeah. And the planet rules a sign, or whatever sign rules the herb. Those are other ways you can do the sign. You can classify the herbs either in terms of signs or in terms of planets.
Yeah, so that's what these do. So this one's doing it mainly by sign. So we've got it goes like Aries, for example, is like Greek sage, oregano. Taurus is like babana, that kind of thing.
So what you do is then you say, okay, so we want to align with Taurus. So let's do Taurus rising or Taurus culminating, or moon in Taurus rising, or moon in Taurus culminating, or moon in Taurus. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then that way you're getting an alignment with that, and that's you can do it.
Yeah.
But it has to be doable. I mean, like I said, if you come up with some totally complicated, convoluted thing that's never possible, then you're never going to be able to use it. And so but see, since most people are just armchair anyway, and they're just doing this to go on social media and argue with people and then tell people how bad they are. You are bad. You suck. It's just like, that's
somewhere actually. Let me find my other one, because the one with the planets is it ascribes one to Earth to 7 planets, and that one has a simpler method for picking out. I think that's just planetary hour actually. Hold on, where is it?
Yeah, that's the classic one.
Yeah, it goes. Yeah, it's known that it's fitting to pick herbs according to the day and hour of the planet in the name of such and such a star, whatever it is, and you should whisper to the herb as you hold it and speak about its healing to seek its aid, and say whatever else. Also, let the moon be full, which is interesting. And then it also has a thing at the end, which is I think we have this in like the PGM as well, where it goes, when you are about to uproot the herb, in place of it, place a grain of wheat or barley in the location of the root, sort of like give an offering back or whatever. Which is very standard from what I've seen. But but even that, that's just day and hour of the planet that rules that.
That's doable.
Full moon, pretty much.
I mean, then you get complicated. Then you have it has to be full moon.
Yeah.
That'll fuck you up right there.
Yeah.
Seriously, how are you gonna fucking get that set up? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like it's not impossible, but that's starting to get problematic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, because it's like, what happens with these things is they start throwing in what they sound would be good.
Right, and your full moon is like,
wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't it be good to have blah blah blah? And then they try to put it all together, and then they tell you put that in the book, and then you like fucking try to do that, and you can't do it. Yeah. So I mean, I would probably just be doing planetary day and hour. I mean, or you can say moon rising in the planet, because even that's kind of hard. The problem you've got is the shit's, when you're talking about harvesting stuff, it depends on the plant. I mean, some of stuff like you can continually, like I have plant, like zinnias. I just planted zinnias, and I've never planted them before, but they say what you can do is you can do cut flowers, right? And so the zinnias, you can just keep cutting them, right? So that would be okay, because you'd have a long time to harvest those, right? Yeah. Other stuff you might only have like a week, right?
And then if you're structured in other astrological factors,
you got to do it that week. You know what I mean? And so whether or not you're going to be able to do that, I mean, that's the saying, is that what takes with somebody who then, so this would have to be somebody who knows all these herbs, right? And then knows about them. But you see how my methodology works?
Yeah.
So basically what you're doing is just like, we're not coming in and we're not throwing it out, right? What we're saying is, okay, so what we've got is we've got these sources that, may or may not be, they're not say corrupt, but you know what I mean? We're like saying, look, I'm not throwing them out, but I'm also not going to just take them as gospel, right? Yeah. And I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, I want to actually do something here. I want to pick these herbs. I don't want to align myself. I want to orient myself astrologically, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm being totally traditional. I'm totally accepting the sign rulership, right? I don't mess with that in this one. I mean, you could, but you know what I'm saying? You could have different sources that have different assignments, something like that. Or you could come up with a logic that, that should be reassigned to something else. But anyhow, I'm just going to say, okay, I'll just take whatever St. John's wort is, whatever, it's the sun.
Yeah.
And then what I want to do is, as much as I can, I want to actually do the thing, but I want to have it as powerful as I can. Right. And I want to align with that. I want to align with the factors, either the sign or the planet. And what can I do in terms of maximizing those at the same time actually doing it? And so since I can only harvest during these 3 weeks of August, right? What are the factors that I can actually come up with that? And say, well, I can't do the moon because, it's not, it's already past the sign. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, like, for example, when I do a fixed star talisman for somebody, it's, everybody can do planetary hours. They have calculators. I just send them a link to a calculator so you can.
I have an planetary hour.
Yeah, exactly. But fixed stars, I'm like, some people, if you can do a full chart election, if you can say what sign, what degrees on the ascendant or rising, then or culminating, great. A lot of people can't handle that, so I do it for them. But in the election I do for them is the fixed star rising or culminating, and the moon applying to conjoin, sextile, or trine, which is the same as basically a creation talisman, right? But that's pretty flexible, right? Because you're going to have the moon, like say Algol, moon applying, to Algol, like, in Taurus, but you can also get, sextile on either side. You get 2 more signs for that. You got trine, you got 3 signs, right? Yeah. And you got a month, right? And that, you know what I mean? You got basically in a month, you got like 6 different opportunities, right?
Yeah. I mean, even then you still got you got orb as well. So like if it's within the orb of like midheaven or descendant as well.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Well, that's because you need to have some time at the, like, for example, like you can get about a half an hour with me. Like I usually do 4 degrees before and 4 degrees after with it on there. So you've got like a half an hour, and so that's pretty easy to do. At the same time, I mean, that's, if you want to do it every day, you'd have to do rising or culminating,
Right.
So you just look at what you've got, and then you're like, now what people will do to me is they'll go like, well, it can't be on a Friday and it has to be before 3:00. And I'll say, I say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I said, pick a day that you have all 24 hours available.
Yeah.
And then I give them the election. Because the problem that people have with elections is that they want to make the stars conform to their schedule. They only want to do the astrology if it's convenient for them.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't. You got to basically abandon yourself to the astrology. Now, at the same time, right, there's a point at which you got to be practical too. I mean, if the election is so difficult that you can never find an event for it, right? Or if you're talking about
or if it's like a minute long window to do.
Yeah, right. Or marriage at 3 a.m. It's like, again, it's not workable. So you just have to. It's every time it's like you're talking about context. There's always this sort of like negotiation between the various factors, practical factors and the astrological factors. And so I think that, I try to be consistent in terms of like, I think like, for example, like this year, I couldn't get a single Mercury. Like I liked it. Mercury, you can get up to +10 in essential dignity. +9 is not that out of control. I mean, you have Virgo, you got +9 because it's sign and exaltation. I couldn't do it like Mercury rising or culminating and Mercury hour in Virgo. So I think I have like a Mercury in the 10th house.
Yeah.
But it's like maybe it's Kazemi or something. For something out of control, powerful, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? It's like that's about as much as normally I wouldn't do that. But I'm like, you're talking about you can't do any Mercury talismans at all. So it seems to me it's like +10, Mercury hour in the 10th. I'm like, okay, I can roll with that. It's not so disastrously, problematic.
Yeah, because I saw you did one. This was a few months ago, I think. You did one from you did a Hermetic wisdom talisman based on the astrological.
Yeah, that had to be. No, that actually was in the 10th. No, it was the latter. It had to be in the latter half of the day or the first part of the day.
Yeah, it's Mercury rising.
The first part of the day. That was actually following the recipe.
Yeah, so what I was saying, it's like pretty much direct out of
that recipe. Now that's a different reason though, because that my standard recipe I'm just using, right? Standard.
Yeah.
If you're following the particular thing, right? Yeah, then you can follow the specific recipe in the thing if you want to. You know what I mean? Or you can abstract. That's what I teach in the like lesson 11 or whatever. We're getting into all this like, okay, if the source doesn't have enough, how do you fill it in? If the source has too much, what do you take out? And what you start doing is saying, well, what's not as central,
right. So how do you decide?
Well, think about it. We just did it with the herbs, right?
Yeah, right. So
if you're talking about an herb that's under the sign of Capricorn or is ruled by the Mercury, right? What the fuck does the sun have to be in Aries for? What's the logic behind that? I don't see it. You know what I'm saying? If I can do it, I'm not going to just throw it out. But if you're talking about a situation where I'm stopped from, because what if I have to want to harvest in September?
Yeah,
can't do it. That to me seems like that's utterly impractical, and it doesn't really seem to be fitting into our. Not that I insist on knowing the logic, right?
Sure.
But you have a situation where you're stopped from actually using this election because of this factor that doesn't make any sense, right? Then I'll take that factor out.
Yeah, or in the very least, like you could try and find a way to like make the sun like well dignified in its
why? Then you're just rationalizing.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? You could try to do that, but I don't see the logic of it. But that flips against me because I'm like, who cares? It's sort of like the source says. You see what I'm saying? It's like you sit there and you just kind of go back and forth. It's perfectly reasonable to say, okay, we'll make the sun, whatever, dignified or something like that. But to me, as I look at that, I'm like, I don't see the logic of the sun in there at all anyway. So let's not worry about that too much. I got to fuck myself up over it, right? I'm going to go with the moon and the sign, or the moon trine and the ruler, or the day and the hour, because that makes sense. You know what I mean? But not that I insist on everything making sense to me. I mean, that's the whole traditional stuff. Is a lot of stuff that just you don't know why they did it.
Yeah.
So, but between a choice of like not doing it at all, then I'm like, okay, then I'm gonna take it out. But that's just one way of going about it. I think that on reflection, what you said, it's like, yeah, if you can do it, as long as you're not rationalizing. I mean, it's this whole thing of like people like elections. They're like, okay, we want an election to start the conference, but it's going to be like a week beforehand at midnight, and I'll light a candle. It's not really it's not the start. It's just sort of fake. You know what I mean? You just got to make sure that it's real. And you don't want to be like saying, oh, well, we're making it in Aries because I did a rooster picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to rationalize it. But I think that again, it's an interesting idea. The sun is though you could get a reason for it. And who knows what happened with it. If maybe could they just, it's sort of like Greater Key of Solomon. It says, it gives all those planetary, materials, and it does say, the planetary hour for the planet.
Yeah.
But then it also has this weird thing where you make everything in parchment at the planetary hour of Mercury.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yes, it's like all the tools and stuff as well. They do that.
It's weird.
Or they try and like substitute it, which is what I see a lot of like modern, like, big air quotes goetics, some of my practitioners do. It's like they find some citation that says, oh well, if you can't do all that in the hour of Mercury, just buy it from someone who's done it in the hour of Jupiter or the hour of Mercury or whatever it is.
What people want to do is consecrate the stuff.
Yeah.
All the time. They're like, I can't make it at that time. I don't want to make it at that time. That's too much work.
Yeah.
I actually had two New Age jewelers on two separate occasions say to me, can't I just think Jupiter thoughts while I'm making it? No. What's nice is that what I consider to be progress, because when I started off 25 years ago, I'm like, it has to be made at the particular time. That's really penetrated with astrological magicians, right? I mean, you get that from New Ageist sort of people or astrology people, right? But the magician people are like, they get it. They're like, yeah, you got to make it at that time.
Yeah.
Now, some of them are doing assembly. Like some of the larger jewelers that you can look at the piece and you can tell that what they did was assemble it. Because you can see it's made out of pieces, right? Yeah. And that's legit. I think that it's just one of those things of like how far you're getting, because you can't create everything at the time. You know what I mean? Like I'm not smelting the metal at that time. I'm not
right. It's not, yeah. Like
you have to have some kind of level of it, but I think to me I like the idea of stamping it or casting it, or
right, or like if it's a metal and you're heating it, like doing the quench or whatever at an astrological time or something.
No, I don't think so.
No? Oh, I've seen the people do that actually.
But what I would say is like, well, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, what are you talking about? Wrought iron stuff?
Well, like in the sense of like if you're like making a blade or something, and you melt.
So you made it over 6 days, but you quenched it at that time?
Yeah, so like you melt the steel down or whatever.
No.
Quench in the astrological hour or whatever.
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that's probably like, so you're getting pretty attenuated from the make. I mean, like it took you 3 days to make it, right? And you quenched it at that point. How is it made at that particular time?
Well, because like it's set in
but it didn't actually
like the influences are in time.
I mean, that doesn't seem to be the same thing as like stamping it. I'm saying the total image is created at that time. Same with casting, you're pouring it in there, right?
Well, yeah, like not necessarily with the image, but like infusing like the astrological virtues into the metal itself. Like because you're cooling the, let's say it's steel or iron, right? For making an iron blade, like you're cooling the
I don't think
thing into the
that just seems like a rationalization to me. Because it's like the thing is, it's like they're very clear. They're like, it needs to be inscribed.
Yeah, sure.
So if I made this whole thing and then I like did some part of the process at that time, like this end thing, it's like, that's when I put the buckle onto it. You know what I mean? Like I made this car, right? It took me 3 weeks, but I put the license plate on at that time. So it's magical at that. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but it's like, maybe what I would say about it is, here's the deal. Like if you make a statue, right? And then you stamp it at the time, the stamp is the astrological portion of it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like what we used to do with rings is we would like make a bunch of signets at the appropriate time, right? And then when someone ordered the ring, then we would take just a size shank for them, and then he would put the signet into the shank. But it was already made. It's like the same thing as like putting the pendant.
Right, so it was pre-made and constant.
Yeah, but the signet was the magical part of it, right?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but like, so did you consecrate the signet beforehand? Or
yeah, he did it right when he made it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just like a pendant talisman, right?
Yeah.
So you make them, you cast them, and you consecrate them during the casting process, during that time limit, right? And so the same thing when I used to do acid etch mirrors. What I would do is you get a stencil, right, and you put it on the mirror, and then I'd have to put all this protective gear and shit on, and then I put this paste to have hydrofluoric acid in it. You put the paste on it, right? And then I'd consecrate them with the paste sitting on them, and then you'd wash the paste off. It's too fucking toxic. I was putting all hydrofluoric acid down my,
that's
not good. The shit's, I mean, they sell it as hobbyist stuff, but the more I started looking into it, I'm like, this is fucking toxic. I mean, I'm wearing protective gear too,
right?
Respirator and like all these gloves and shit. But see, that was the same deal. That was a process that was very fast, right? And they took on their final form, right, during the time.
Yeah.
And so this stuff of like, I got this a very elaborate process that's taking me way outside the window, but this final little piece of it is during my window. I mean, I'm like, whatever. It just seems to me it's like one of those things is like, I'm a believer in convenience, but I have a limit. Now, everybody's got to decide for themselves.
Sure.
I wouldn't want to come in and say, no, this is wrong. But that just seems to me to be like, it's like I had a student recently who like bought these rings and everything or whatever, something like that, and what were they gonna do? I forget what they're gonna do. Like, shit, this is not a good example because I'm trying to remember what they were gonna do. But it was just like that. It was like I think it was like quenching it or something like that. And I'm like, no, it wasn't close enough.
Yeah.
But because it's really as much as possible, like I said, you want it to take on its final form. You want it to be that's when it takes on its form, right? As opposed to be like, that's when it's born.
Well, yeah, because it sounds like very like Aristotelian kind of forms, like the thing comes to maturity when the form is realized, and you do that in astrological time.
Right. I mean, it's or just whatever how you want to put it platonically, but it's just like, and I'm telling you that because it's like I have this intuition about it,
right?
And that's what I would say about it is that it accords with that. Now, that's just because, but see, what I would say about that is that, again, I think that you just have to be very self-aware as far as why you're doing it this way. And like I said, I have to say the metal stuff, I mean, in a way I'd like to do gold, but it's not workable. So am I doing the same thing? To a certain extent, yes. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I would say about this is that I don't want to get too censorious about how people are doing this stuff. I just think you just want to do as much as possible to do it right, as opposed to like just doing it as a way around it, a rationalization or whatever. It's like easy, so it's just like say we're doing it. So it just reminds me. I just remember reading this book about tantric sex, and they were like talking about all this sort of like you're supposed to have this special like forbidden foods, as part of the whole thing, and like. And they're like wine, and they said, well, you get this, and if you can't get that, get crackers. And I just had this repugnance of these people thinking they were having tantric sex, and they're eating crackers and having sex. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like drinking wine and having crackers. Yeah,
exactly. So it's tantric sex.
Well, you also like you seem to be missing the point in that case, then, because like the whole one of the big arguments in tantra, especially like tantric sex and rituals and like koala kind of stuff. It's like it's intended that you do things that are inherently like what's the word for it? Like you do things that are inherently like heterodox in order to break the social.
It's almost like it's what I had this flash when you're saying this is it's repugnant.
Yeah, like you do.
You're just having sex. It's just for fun. You're like, like I said, it's sort of like delusional. That's like, I'm having tantric sex. And it's like, not really.
Yeah, because and that's something because like the whole point of it, the intention is to break like it's like to break the shackle of the ego, right? Like to break the conditioning there. So if you're doing it and you're enjoying it. And it's like pleasurable to you, ultimately, then like you're missing the entire point of doing it in the first place.
Right. Well, and this is what I'd say about the talisman stuff. I've never missed an election for a talisman.
Yeah.
And people will frequently, I missed it. Because they have other shit going on. It's too busy. It's not a priority. For me, it was like fucking top priority. Now I'm a little OCD too, but I was like, I never missed it. I was always totally prepared and all the stuff. And I've always, for a while I was doing these Taoist paper talismans, kind of inspired by Taoist stuff.
Right.
Taoist talismans.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the Taoist talismans, they do a lot of calligraphic stuff and all these wild letters.
I've got a manuscript of them actually. I tried to get it translated, but I don't know anyone who knows good enough Chinese and is in that tradition well enough to actually be able to translate it. But it's basically a talisman.
You can't really do it without a tremendous amount of, you'd have to be in the tradition. But I like I felt like it was one of those things that could be used. So what I did was, I printed out these postcards. And I like the technology because if you print out a colored postcard at the appropriate moment, that's a talisman. It's printed at the appropriate moment.
Yeah.
It's created at that time. So you can do it technologically. So I did that. I printed out the image and then I did calligraphy with it. And then I had stamps. So I had these stamps made for like the symbols of the fixed star, planet, or whatever. And so I would do like, basically like the goals and the names of the people. If I did individual, I'd do it for them personally, and then I would stamp over it. And it's just like, there's all sorts of ways that you can use the technology and the stuff that we have available to us within the confines of it.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to, I think, as much adapt, rather than forcing like, I have to make a sword, so I'm going to force the astrological stuff into the sword making process. I think you need to figure out what the astrological process is and find stuff that fits within it. That would be my thing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if you start off like, I have to have this expensive looking jeweled talisman and I have to buy that. So therefore I have to rationalize why I'm, putting it on a chain at the appropriate time is somehow, the final form. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that going on. And it's like, the thing about talismans is that, I'm not say guilty, but I'm doing pendant talismans. That's just one possible form. A talisman can be anything. Anything that takes on its form at that time and is consecrated as a talisman. Renaissance, we've got the Schiffernoia Palace or whatever, the decade.
Well, it's not like, we've got like, the big, like
the city. Yeah, the whole city that's astrological. Yeah. So it's, I think I love working with artists. That's another thing that's cool too. Is like, people will get really, or people sending me the altar pictures. That's another thing too. I get all these people sending me these pictures of their altars and they're so gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I really feel like there's a tremendous amount of creativity. And the thing about creativity is that it's much more, if you've got a blank slate, it's less inspiring. If you have certain restrictions, right, it can often be even more inspiring within those restrictions. And so I think that's what I would say about it is that for me, I like the idea of as much as possible conforming to that idea of it takes on its form at that time. But, you can do assembly. That's another thing too. You get all these pieces and put them together. Like they talk about the fixed star stuff. They say, okay, you have a ring and you have a stone of that planet and you have a herb and you put the ring together with a stone and you consecrate it at that time. That's an assembly one.
Right. That's like what we see in like the second book of Hermes. That's like the Hermetic way of doing it as well.
Yeah. But what's interesting about that, the fixed star stuff is, like I said, if you're going to hassle me about using metals or whatever, it's like, well, the fixed star book said it has to be this thing. I'm like, they have these very elaborate images, right? And it is impossible to engrave that on a stone at that particular election.
Right. If you're talking about like a ring or something, right?
You couldn't do it. It's too small anyway.
It's way too small. Yeah.
If you want to have an image, you really have to be open to using metal.
Yeah.
It's just like one of those things. It's like that's another one of my practical sort of things. And I'm like, you can't say, it has to be made out of liquid mercury. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just impossible. This is like, that's the sort of thing. So that's what I would say about it is I think that what we're getting into now is this level of, again, just talking to you, you have a very high knowledge of these sources, and you got this experience with it and you're firmly embedded in the tradition. And so it's going to be exciting to see how people, because you're not coming from a new age, you're not coming from a modern astrology perspective.
Right. I kind of traditional.
Yeah, exactly. And you're really going back to the sources and all this sort of stuff. So this is all stuff that I think is really great. And I'm really my ambition is to write an astrological magic textbook. I think I've tentatively called it Astrological Magic Theory and Practice, and do it as, so people would like a how-to book. It's like, yeah, you really should take a course, you know.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I'd like to do a textbook, you know, and just the kind of issues we were just talking about in terms of resolving those. And not saying that there's a definitive way of doing it, but just laying out the different possible methodologies and different possible approaches. You know,
Right.
and just so that's kind of my ambition for my final, you know,
big hurrah.
Yeah, exactly, would be to get this, you know, I don't know, a couple 100-page, you know, textbook out. And I think that then, you know, people can then run with it. You know what I mean? And what we're going to see is this intelligent and sympathetic synthesis of 21st century approach within the tradition. I mean, we're going to see a continuation of the Western esoteric tradition. You know what I mean? And we're having a Hermetic Renaissance right now.
We are, yeah.
You know, it's just, it's comparable to the Renaissance. You know, it's just like the ferment that this is causing is incredible, and it's all under the surface. I mean, it's not apparent to the greater society, right? But it has a very far-reaching influence. And so I think that that's, you know, it's funny because this friend of mine said to me, because he was kind of in, you know, a visionary person, and he said, you know, he said, what I was told was there's going to be this sort of Renaissance like 400 years from now, and that the stuff that we're doing now is going to be important for that. So that's kind of like, that was kind of my thing. I said, okay, I wrote my preface, and I said that in the preface of the astrological magic thing. And, you know, cause it's like, I do believe that this is, you know, there's an underground period, there's a growth, you know, and then there's a kind of efflorescence of it, and the flowers, and then it, you know, but it continues like that. It's a continuous, like, you know, the Western esotericism, you know, has had this continuous history, you know, for 2,000, 3,000 years. So I think that hopefully, I mean, industrial civilization has a very short shelf life.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, it's not around.
So the ability to have 7 billion people on the planet, you know, is going to be, you know, I don't think that humans will necessarily be wiped out, but I mean, I think that what's in our cultural DNA is fall of the Roman Empire stuff. And that wasn't just an immediate fall, but a kind of a slide, recover, slide, recover kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, it's, but I think that the whole, I mean, I have an air conditioner and all, I mean, that's all the sort of stuff. It's like, you know, I like it. And I mean, but I don't see any way of stopping you know, the basically break. I mean, we've got these, looks like wars and all this kind of stuff. So it would be nice to kind of, that's what I feel like my job is to kind of like, you know, to like I said, write the textbook, you know, and the things that I would say that I can advance on is that I've never seen a Hermetic or astrological source say, you know, there's lots of ways of doing this.
Yeah, the only other different one I can think of is like what's called like the Predictive is the other one, because like that doesn't, like there's not as much astrological stuff in there. It's more like elemental talisman that you like based on like, you know, associations are with the same letter of like all like the beginning of the letter.
Yeah, it sounds like Kiranides.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying in terms of like, there's not a right way to do it.
Yeah.
It's this multi-perspectival thing, you know, and the whole Buddhist, the consciousness, you know, because that's what I would say is that ultimately, I think a lot of times the theurgy is, if consciousness is approached in a certain way, like, you know, like Iamblichus said, don't change the barbarous names of God. You know, if you do certain, you know, ritual things that you don't need to know the meaning of them, you just do them. Then the spirits respond to it. To me, that's consciousness. I mean, consciousness manifesting in all these incredible different forms, right?
Right.
With the underlying unity of consciousness. And that to me is what magic is. It's like you think about getting like a stop sign, right? It just says stop, but it works, right? And it is a type of magic, isn't it?
Right. It's like you make the argument about road markings. It's like, you know, like lines on the road, like they don't actually have any power. We just all unanimously agree that.
But I don't agree with that. I think they are powerful. It's not conventional. It's not conventional. You see what I'm saying? Because that's that sort of article of faith of atheistic materialistic nihilism, that it's all deconstructivist, you know, it's all made up. But it isn't. It isn't. It's beyond us. We don't have the power to change it. You know, and it's also, I don't think that it's not really human created.
Yeah.
You know? And so if you flip to that, you're like, so that's what I would say, like a lot of the magical stuff and ritual work is like, and like I said, if you change consciousness, you change reality.
Right.
If you think about like the Sufi saints, like Baraka, breath, they just have to will something and it happens, and that's what the Quran says, kun, all he has to do is say be kun and it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, or like a dream, if you conceive of the change in a dream, it changes. So that's what I would say is for a modern person is a way to understand this. It's a little bit easier way in. And I also think that, it ends up being a universe not of individual separate, because causality requires the things be separate. There has to be a connection between two separate things. That's what causality is. And I'm questioning whether there is causality. I mean, I see dependent arising. I mean, these things arise together, but what caused what? I don't think so. I mean, it's sort of like that. It's a useful model in certain circumstances.
Right. If you're trying to like isolate things down.
We're modeling. And that's what I would say. Ultimately, come to this is say we're modeling, but that doesn't mean it's meaningless either, or it's deconstructivist. Right?
Yeah.
Just because there's different models doesn't mean that there's not something going on. There's something going on, right?
Yeah.
You can say that for sure. You say I think, therefore I am. That assumes there's an I, and that's an unwarranted assumption. That's a tautology basically. But if you say something's going on, it's not nothing.
Yeah,
I've never seen nothing.
Even the Stoic things, like I remember that, like when I was reading the Stoic things, sometimes like because the Stoics were all like vicious materialists in that sense, like very, very material, or like maybe corporealists because they're all talking about bodies. Like they try and they conceptualize God as a body, but then they also recognize that they can't really do it, so they call it like the something. Like God is the something, like a somethingness. Is like the way they describe it.
That's not bad though.
Yeah, no, it's like it's it kind of makes sense when you think about it,
because you really can't because the word God. I mean, I think to a lot of people, first of all, it's meaningless, or it's the the Yahweh, the white sky god, the thunderbolt guy who zap your ass. I mean, that's the sort of thing. Or he's just big. He's big, and he's like me, but he's really, really big, right? And he's can do whatever he wants. I mean, Christianity doesn't make a lot of sense. And a lot of God is only good. Well, where does evil come from? It's like, oh well, blah blah blah. I mean, that kind of stuff. It's just like a little crazy. I was reading Jung's answer to Job, which I like. I mean, that was pretty courageous of him to like wrestle with that. But when he starts talking about Yahweh, I'm like, oh, it's Yaldabaoth. You know who that is?
Right. Yeah,
it's Samael. I mean, that makes sense to me, except I'm not a Gnostic. I don't think that the ultimate, I mean, I think that I'm much more Hermetic. I do think the world there's evil in the world, no question about it.
Yeah.
But the good is much more, there's much more good than evil. Yeah. I mean, I just think that
the Hermetic view of it is that the I guess like the evil in the world is like it's a result of the astral passions that are imparted to us at birth by like the decanic dogma. Because like the thing that like you hear it in like this it talks about in like the Mystai Hermetica, like you have the deacons or like the spirits of the deacons, and the daimons are not necessarily separate from the deacons. Like the daimons are like the end. Like they actually call the energy. They say like the daimons are the energeia of the deacon, right? So they're the energy of the deacons, which in a sense of like activity, and they are like when we descend through. Usually it's the gate of Cancer, right? If we're following Numenius. It's like we descend where at the moment of birth it creates a natal chart, and then as we're coming down through all the planets and we're taking on all the little influences from planets, the deacons and the astral daimons, they like warp and twist our soul in certain ways, but in doing so they create phantasmata, which is like the phantom image, like our imaginations basically, like are created by these decanic entities, and then they lead us astray with these fake images, and then we become addicted to the fake images that are produced by these deacons or these daimons, and then we chase them, and it is that chasing after the things that creates the evil in the world. That's kind of how
except though that God created evil though, right?
Yes, this is the same. Like the world
the capability is what I would say about it is that my tendency is to say, look, that God is not God. I don't want to talk about God. I mean, I don't like the term, but I mean like the oneness or whatever.
Yeah, the one. Sure.
It contains all potential things.
Yeah.
So that therefore the good and the evil both manifest. Because everything is possible. Everything that's possible is, you know what I mean? This sort of idea about, I was thinking, there's a hadith of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that says, Allah says, I was a hidden treasure, and wanting to be known, I made, creation. So that's what everything is, this theophanic self-disclosure.
Right. It's all like it's all reality is like God self-actualizing.
Yeah. But everything you can think of, then it happens. So you can think of bad stuff happens too. The other thing I would say too is that bad from an individual standpoint, it's like your skin cell dying. I mean, it's bad for the skin cell, but I mean, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, because Iamblichus talks about this, where it's like when Porphyry questions him about this kind of thing, it's like, why is if the gods are unchanging and all good, then why do they punish people? Like, why do people have bad fates, that kind of thing? It's like, well, our perception of what is considered justice is very limited. If you compare that to like an angel or intelligence or a god, they're looking at on a much wider scale. Like what we may interpret as something bad is, in a wide scale viewpoint, it's not actually as that way.
The thing is, though, that bad, really, really horrible shit happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it predated humans. Like, these parasites, the wasps that lay their eggs inside the caterpillars and eat the caterpillars out from the inside. That kind of stuff.
And we've got like a bunch of
that's all kind of like, but see, it's only bad from the caterpillar standpoint. It's not bad from the wasp standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you can go through all this stuff, but guess what I would say about it is that that both good and evil clearly exist, right? They're part of reality. And it's like, to say that God is only good is like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, God is all powerful, and yet God, is all good. I'm like, no, that can't be. I mean, and so, I think that reality is overall, it's sort of like evil is a bit like a stone in your shoe. You're like, ow, 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 and you take it out, and it's really tiny, but it bugs the shit out of you.
Yeah.
It's like, today was so amazingly beautiful. We had like I said, 22 degrees Celsius, sunny. We've had a lot of rain. We've had all these beautiful flowers and plants and everything growing like crazy. It's just so gorgeous out there. We had sunshine. And so it was like, wow, it's such a beautiful day. So there's a lot of that. You read all this news that's terrible, but it doesn't mention all the 6 billion people that had a good day. 6 billion people had a good day yesterday. But I don't know. Like I said, these are, if we can look at this, if astrology and magic are an entry point into this kind of question, and also in a way of grappling with it and actually engaging with it as opposed to just conceptualizing it and arguing about it, then I think it's really worthwhile. Like I said, my Robert Zoller, he started off teaching me sort of like, it was more like the philosophy, not so much magic, practical magic. But he had me do all this practical stuff. Like he had me become a Mason. He wanted me to do, I was all 19th century sort of stuff, mesmerism, all this kind of stuff. But it was really worthwhile because he's like, you got to do it. If you just think about it, if you're just reading books, if you're just doing the armchair seeker level, you're never going to get anywhere. You've got to actually engage with the stuff and actually do things. And so I think that that's what I would say is that, astrology and magic, astrology, every time you do a prediction, you're engaging with, and you're putting your butt on the line, in terms of your practice. And magic is the same way. You're trying, you're actually doing the ritual and everything like that. And if the more theurgic uses of it is great, as long as it's like not just people talking about it, but doing it. That's what I would say. It's like people need to go out and do the ritual, and engage with it. And that's because just reading about it is, that's what a lot of people, that's like the philosophy professor. They know it's not real. They just talk about it.
Right.
I read this book about Tiantai, or the Tendai school, which is really fascinating Buddhist school. And they kind of combine everything in the other schools. They have Zen, they do meditation, they do Mikyo, they do the tantric stuff. They have an incredible philosophy, really, really incredible. And I thought I really enjoyed reading the stuff until I get to the end and the guy's like basically saying, oh, actually, it's a bunch of bullshit. And I was like, how can you study this?
Yeah.
But he had to give obeisance to atheistic materialism.
Yeah.
He couldn't acknowledge that this was legitimate. And it's like when it was so much more philosophically incredibly sophisticated, and oriented to reality than atheistic materialism is.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. The problem with that atheistic materialism is a model, but I think it's an inadequate model in so many ways. It doesn't explain so much stuff. And
and also it automatically tends towards nihilism as
exactly. See, there you go. I mean, this is like very few people get that, and I'm like, you automatically you're gonna if you continue with it, the logic of it is nihilism, you know, and nihilism is really the self, because if you think about it, the self, yeah, you don't exist and then you exist, you know, and you're not going to exist, and you're powerless, and you know you don't get what you want. Exactly, that's nihilism. So in other words, it's a perspective of self, and it's like, but that's not the only possible perspective. You know, once you have a perspective of, like I said, enlightenment is the perspective of all. You know what I mean? If you can have the perspective of all, right? You know, or just relax into the underlying, Buddha nature, you know, into the underlying consciousness that pervades all things, right? Without laying all this other stuff on top of it. Then there you go. That's all you got to do. But, you know, if you're seeing from the self, obviously that's what's, you know, the whole Four Noble Truths. It's like, you know, they say the life involves suffering. The reason it involves suffering is because you're seeing from the perspective of a self. If you don't see from the perspective of a self, you don't necessarily have to suffer.
Right. So you've removed the concept of the self, then you're no suffering.
No, not the concept, the reality of the self.
Reality.
You have to react. You have to. There has to be this realization. See, that's what a Kensho experience is. This is an actual experience of no self, and so, which is weird, because if there's no I, there's no. It's possible to have full awareness without having this organizing center, which seems like you have to have this. I mean, I is the most. That's what that I think. Therefore, I am stuff is all about. It seems like, there has to be an I. There has to be a self to organize everything, to have a focus. It's like you don't need a focal point. The focal point is not necessary. So that's what I'm saying, is like, I think that there's a lot of, it's exciting to see how much astrological magic has become so much more popular. It's still esoteric within the astrological community, but nevertheless, people are aware of it, and people are drawn to it, and people are very open to it. And it's also being used as a jumping off point to a lot of other interesting stuff. So that's what I would say. It's like, is a practical application of spirituality is very useful, and it's great on its own. But what I can see from you, that you're already jumping off, and you know that other people are doing it as well, is really kind of exciting. So I think that's really, I think it really makes me feel fulfilled. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like I felt like I was guided to this, and when I did it, I was the only one doing it publicly. You know, 25 years ago, and now it's all over the place. It's not. I don't own it. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
All I do is start the ball rolling. It's sort of like an avalanche. You know, you start a little bit of snowball, and it kind of, you know, it gets bigger and bigger, and it belongs to everybody that does it. But it is kind of gratifying to me to see the direction it's taken. And like I said, what I continually putting out now is this idea that we're all modeling. There's lots of different approaches, and there's no reason to argue about stuff. You know what I mean? We have to find something that's fitted to our own, to fit to us. Doesn't mean everything works and everything we want works, but nevertheless, there's lots of different possible approaches. And I think that's probably one of the most valuable things I can offer now, particularly with social media, where there's so much of a tendency to argue. There's so much of a tendency to polarize. There's so much of a tendency to attack.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It is really kind of unpleasant. And it's like, you know, to be able to have some respect for other people's views and to allow other people to do it differently, I think it shows great, you know, that's what we want to all aim for.
Yeah.
So good. Well, I should probably roll.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've been on for like only 3 hours, so we should.
Yeah, well, it's probably enough time.